Hi guys, and welcome to Gentle History for Deep Sleep. Tonight we step into the cold blue dark of the Oregon Trail, where the wagon canvas snaps like a tired sail and every breath hangs before your face like a pale ghost. You stand beside a wooden wheel rimmed with frost, listening to oxen shift in their harness and to the wind searching for any gap it can find. Under the canvas, a child coughs, a kettle ticks as it cools, and a wool blanket smells of smoke, dust, and the long road behind you. It is beautiful in a stern sort of way, though you probably will not survive this if your idea of winter preparation is owning one decorative throw blanket. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell everyone in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and let the wagon trail close around you. You are travelling west with a family that has already learned one essential truth. The cold does not arrive politely. It slides under the wagon cover, creeps through sleeves, settles into boots, and makes every small task feel slower. On the Oregon Trail, emigrant families usually begin their journey in spring so they can reach the far side of the continent before deep winter. That is the sensible plan. The trail, however, has no obligation to respect sensible plans. Early snow can fall in the mountains, hard frost can strike the plains, rain can soak bedding, and sudden wind can turn an ordinary evening into a night of shaking hands and stiff fingers. Your wagon is not a cozy wooden room on wheels. It is closer to a moving storage shed covered in canvas. Most people walk beside it because the wagon is packed with flour, tools, spare clothing, cookware, seed, bedding, and whatever possessions the family cannot leave behind. The ride is rough, the space is cramped, and the canvas is not built to hold warmth like a house wall. It blocks some wind and rain, but cold air still finds its way inside. You can feel the difference between cold in a home and cold on the trail. At home, even a poor cabin has thick logs, clay chinking, a roof, and a hearth that can burn for hours. Here, every evening begins with the same uncertain search. Is there shelter nearby? Is there fuel? Is the ground dry enough to sleep on? Can the animals be secured before dark? Warmth depends on all of these things at once. The family around you moves with quiet purpose. Older children gather whatever fuel they can find. An adult checks the wagon cover for loose ties. Another shakes out blankets and feels them for dampness. A pot is placed near the fire, not because hot food is a luxury, but because a warm meal helps the body face the night. Wet socks are turned near the flames. Mittens are inspected. A cap is pulled over a child's ears. No one uses the phrase thermal management, because that would sound absurd beside a wagon wheel, but that is what everyone is doing. The coldest hours often come just before dawn, when the fire has burned low and the body has spent hours losing heat. You know this only after living through a few such mornings. At sunset, spirits may still be lively. People joke, eat, mend clothing, and talk about the miles ahead. At midnight, the wagon feels smaller. At 3 a.m, every draft seems personal. One curious trail custom is the habit of sleeping in much of the clothing already worn during the day. Modern advice might suggest changing into something clean and dry, and that would be ideal. Yet clean and dry are ambitious words on a muddy overland journey. If your shirt is only slightly damp, and the spare shirt is buried under a barrel, you may decide fashion can wait until Oregon. A bonnet, cap, shawl, or extra pair of stockings can become a part of the bedding. Privacy is limited too, so changing inside a crowded wagon is less a graceful ritual and more a negotiation involving elbows and resigned silence. You notice how each person experiences the cold differently. The father may insist he is fine while stamping his feet. The mother may feel chilled first because she has spent the evening handling wet cloth and cold cookware. A child may fall asleep quickly, then wake crying when the temperature drops. An older traveller may struggle with stiff joints. The family's warmth is never one problem. It is several bodies, several ages, and several tempers, all contained in a canvas space barely large enough for comfort. Historians still argue whether emigrant diaries understate the daily misery of cold because discomfort seemed too ordinary to record, or overstate it because extreme nights were the ones most worth remembering. Both possibilities make sense. A diary might mention a terrible frost in one line, then move directly to the condition of the oxen, to the writer. That brief note may carry an entire night of numb fingers, crying children, and frozen shoes. The animals matter nearly as much as the people. Oxen and mules must survive too. Without them, the wagon stops. You hear the oxen breathing in the dark, their bodies giving off clouds of steam. Families sometimes camp with wagons arranged to offer protection, while animals are kept nearby where they can be watched. Their warmth does not turn the wagon into a barn, unfortunately. But their presence changes the little pocket of air around camp. It also brings smells that romantic paintings seem happy to forget. Warmth is tied to timing. A family that delays too long in the morning may travel fewer miles. A family that pushes too far in the evening may reach camp after dark and struggle to find fuel. Stop early, and you protect people from the night. Stop too early, and winter may catch you farther west. The trail asks you to choose between immediate comfort and future danger, which is not very relaxing behaviour for a road. As darkness deepens, you understand that pioneer warmth is rarely produced by one clever invention. It comes from layers of effort, a sheltered campsite, a fire that survives the wind, dry bedding, wool clothing, hot food, shared blankets, bodies sleeping close together, someone waking to check the children, someone adding fuel before the flames vanish, someone noticing that a corner of canvas has loosened. You pull the blanket closer and listen. The wind presses against the wagon cover, then eases. The kettle gives one last soft click. Outside, footsteps cross the frozen ground. Inside, the family settles inch by inch, making room where there is none. You're not warm yet, not truly, but you are learning the first rule of the frozen trail. Survival begins before anyone lies down. It begins with attention, preparation, and the quiet agreement that no one in this wagon faces the cold alone. By the time the eastern sky begins to pale, your family has already learned that choosing where to stop can matter almost as much as choosing what to wear. The wagon may be your shelter, but the land around it decides whether that shelter feels merely cold or almost unbearable. A few yards can make a difference. A shallow hollow may catch still air. A low ridge may block one wind while exposing you to another. A line of trees can offer protection, though it can also drop snow, branches, and a surprising number of irritated birds onto your camp. You begin to look at the landscape differently. A pleasant view is no longer the first concern. You are searching for small signs. Which way is the grass bending? Where has snow piled deepest? Is there a bank, grove, bluff, or stand of brush that can break the force of the wind? Is the ground dry? Or does it hold hidden water beneath a crust of frost? Can the animals be kept close without trampling the sleeping area? The perfect campsite rarely appears, so every evening becomes a quiet exercise in compromise. On open prairie, the wind seems to come from everywhere at once. Though it usually has a clear direction if you stop and pay attention, you turn your face toward it and feel which cheek goes numb first. Smoke from a small test fire drifts sideways. Loose hair and bonnet strings point like little weather instruments. Once the direction is understood, the wagon can be positioned so its strongest side faces the blast. The broad side of a covered wagon catches wind like a sail, which is not useful when you're trying to sleep. Instead, Families often angle the wagon or point one end toward the prevailing wind. The rear of the wagon may be turned into the cold, especially if it is more tightly closed than the front. The tongue and team are arranged according to space, safety, and the needs of the animals. Nothing is as tidy as a drawing in a history book. Wheels sink, harness tangles. Someone gives conflicting instructions. An ox chooses that exact moment to become philosophical and stop moving. The basic historical fact is simple. Most emigrant wagons were not normally arranged in a perfect defensive circle every evening. That famous ring of wagons appears often in films. But practical camps could form lines, arcs, clusters, or loose groups depending on terrain and danger. A circle took time and room. On a narrow riverbank or mountain approach, there might be no space for it at all, for warmth. A tighter grouping could still help because nearby wagons and tents disturbed the wind and created pockets of calmer air. You notice this when several families camp together. One wagon alone looks small beneath the sky. 6 wagons close together begin to form something like a temporary village. Canvas covers ripple at different rhythms. Fires glow between them. People move through lanes of smoke and shadow. The wagons do not create true walls, but they soften the open emptiness. A gust that strikes the first wagon may reach the next with slightly less force. The choice of ground matters too. Cold air settles in low places, especially on clear nights. A hollow that feels protected from wind at sunset may become a basin of bitter air before dawn. A higher spot may be colder in the wind but warmer under calm skies. You cannot consult a weather application, naturally. You consult experience, instinct, cloud movement, and the opinion of whichever traveller speaks with the greatest confidence. That person is not always correct. Historians continue to debate whether most emigrant families understood local cold air patterns through practical observation, or whether many simply chose campsites according to water and grazing without recognizing why certain hollows became painfully cold. Diary entries sometimes show sharp awareness of weather. Other entries suggest that people discovered poor choices only after waking to frozen blankets and stiff boots. Knowledge travels unevenly, especially along a road filled with people from different regions and backgrounds. Trees are a gift when they appear, cottonwoods along rivers, pines in mountain country, and scattered groves can reduce wind. Yet trees also bring hazards. Dead branches can fall. Snow can drop from limbs in heavy clumps. Damp wood may smoke badly. Thick shade can keep the ground frozen after nearby open land has softened. A sheltered grove may also hold colder air after sunset. You lead the wagon close enough to benefit from the trees, but not directly beneath the most dangerous branches. The decision feels cautious, almost modern. Until someone suggests sleeping under a tree that leans at an angle, no sensible tree should attempt. You quietly choose another spot. A quirky trail practice sometimes involved using sacks, boxes, spare boards, barrels, and even furniture as temporary windscreens. A family might place trunks near the open end of a wagon or stack supplies where a draft entered. This was not elegant engineering. It was household clutter promoted to military service. A flour sack became insulation. A wooden chest became a wall. A folded mattress became a door. The trail had a way of turning every possession into something other than what it was meant to be. Snow itself could offer protection, when deep enough. It might be banked around wheels or along the lower side of a wagon to block drafts. This had to be done carefully because melting snow created dampness. And dampness was the enemy waiting patiently behind the cold. Still, a low bank of packed snow could reduce the wind that swept beneath the wagon bed. You crouch beside the wheels and press snow into gaps with gloved hands. The work is slow, and the cold pushes through the gloves. Your fingers ache, then grow strangely dull. You stop to warm them before continuing. It is easy to imagine pioneers as endlessly tough, but they suffer the same numbness, clumsiness, and irritation that you would. The difference is not that they feel less, it is that the work still has to be finished. The wagon brake can be set, wheels blocked, and the vehicle steadied against gusts on steep or uneven ground. Extra care is needed. A wagon that shifts during the night can damage equipment, frighten animals, or wake an entire family in a manner nobody finds peaceful. Stones and wooden blocks are placed near the wheels. Ropes may be checked. The tongue is lowered or supported. Every small adjustment makes the camp more secure. Water is another reason camps gather near streams, but river bottoms are often colder than nearby slopes. Fog forms, frost thickens, dampness rises. You can hear water moving beneath thin ice, a dark, restless sound that continues while the camp grows quiet. The stream is necessary for drinking, cooking, washing, and livestock, but sleeping directly beside it may invite a colder night, so you carry water farther than you would like. The bucket feels heavy, ice forms around its rim, your boots crunch over frozen ground. The wagon stands a short distance above the river, tucked behind a bank where reeds bend in the wind. It is not perfect, but the smoke rises more steadily here. As evening returns, the camp begins to make sense. Wagons face similar directions, fires occupy protected spaces, animals stand where they can be watched. Bedding remains inside until the last useful moment so it does not collect frost. Children are warned not to scatter tools or clothing. Someone ignores that warning almost immediately. You stand beside the chosen wagon place and feel the wind pass above the bank rather than directly through you. It still reaches the canvas, it still searches the seams, yet its voice is softer now. This is how warmth begins before the fire is lit. It begins with reading the land, turning the wagon, blocking the wheels, avoiding the coldest hollow, and accepting that nature rarely offers comfort without conditions. You are not defeating winter, you're simply asking it to move around you rather than straight through you, and for one night on the Oregon Trail, that is a very respectable victory. The wagon stands in its chosen place, turned against the wind as wisely as the evening allows, but the canvas above you still trembles and snaps. Shelter is never absolute here. The cold does not need an open door. It needs only a loose seam, a lifted flap, or a space no wider than your finger. Through such openings, the night enters patiently. You climb inside and immediately feel where the trouble lies. A narrow stream of air touches your neck. Another slips along the floorboards and curls round your ankles. The wagon smells of wool, flour, leather, smoke, and damp wood. Every object seems to hold a little cold of its own. Iron tools feel like blocks of ice. Tin cups sting your fingers. The canvas looks solid in the dimness, yet when the wind pushes against it, tiny points of moonlight appear through worn places. A covered wagon usually carries a canvas top stretched over curved wooden boughs. The cloth is often made from heavy cotton duck or a similar tightly woven material. Treated to resist rain, it protects cargo and passengers from sun, dust, and weather. But it is not insulation in the modern sense. There is no padded wall, no sealed window, and certainly no quiet little heater humming in the corner. The same cover that feels stifling under summer sun can seem thin and helpless in winter wind. Your first task is to find the drafts. You do this without instruments, unless you count your own skin as an instrument, which it certainly becomes. You move slowly along the wagon bed, holding one hand near the seams. Cold air reveals itself against the warmth of your palm. A candle flame can also show where the wind enters, though open flame near dry canvas, bedding, and flour is not an especially relaxing experiment. Most families rely on touch, sound, and the movement of loose threads. The front and rear openings create the greatest problems. They must remain accessible, but access and warmth are poor companions. Canvas flaps can be tied, overlapped, or weighted. Blankets may be hung across the opening. Spare clothing can be stuffed along the edges. A shawl that belonged in a trunk becomes part of the wall. An old petticoat becomes a curtain. Nothing on the trail keeps its original job for long. You press a folded blanket against the rear flap and secure it with cord. The fabric sags in the middle, but the sharpest draft weakens. Along the wagon floor, you push sacks into the corners. One contains clothing, another contains grain. Both now serve as barriers against cold air. Boxes are shifted so they stand between the sleepers and the outer canvas. The arrangement reduces living space, though living space was already a generous phrase. One peculiar solution involves pinning newspapers, scraps of cloth, or pieces of old sacking along the inside of the cover. Newspapers are not common enough to waste casually, but where they are available, the layers can slow air movement. Printed pages that once carried election speeches, shipping notices, or advertisements for miracle tonics now stand between your family and the wind. It is difficult to feel politically inspired while using a senator's dress to plug a freezing crack, but perhaps that is the most useful service the speech ever provides. The insulation does not have to be thick to help. Still air is valuable. A loose inner layer creates a narrow pocket between itself and the outer canvas. That trapped air slows the transfer of heat. Pioneer families may not describe this process with scientific language, but repeated experience teaches them what works. A blanket hanging slightly away from the canvas can be more useful than one pressed flat against it. Layers matter because each one interrupts the path of the cold. Historical accounts make clear that emigrants carried quilts, comforters, feather beds, and wool blankets whenever space and money allowed. Such bedding was not merely sentimental household property, it could be essential equipment. Quilts hung from wagon bows form inner curtains. Comforters cover crates and trunks that radiate cold. Spare blankets divide the interior into smaller spaces, which are easier to warm with bodies and breath. There is a price for sealing everything too tightly. People breathe out moisture, damp clothing releases more. Cooking steam may linger if food is warmed near the opening. By morning, condensation can collect on the inner canvas, then drip onto blankets or freeze in thin white patches. You wake to find the shelter protected from wind but damp from within. Warmth requires a balance between stopping drafts and allowing moisture to escape. Researchers disagree over how often emigrants deliberately ventilated their wagons during severe cold, rather than discovering the need only after bedding became wet. Some diary descriptions suggest practical awareness of condensation, others barely mention it. The absence of detail leaves room for argument, especially because tasks that seem ordinary to the writer may never reach the page. You lift one corner of the front flap just enough to let moist air leave. The opening seems foolish at first. Why invite cold inside after spending so much effort keeping it out? Yet the air soon feels less heavy. The smell of wet wool softens. A little steam escapes into the darkness. The secret is not complete sealing. It is controlled breathing, as though the wagon itself must inhale and exhale. The condition of the canvas matters greatly. A new cover sheds wind and rain better than one worn thin by months of travel. Dust works into the weave, branches scratch it, repeated wetting and drying stiffen the cloth. Sparks from campfires can burn tiny holes. Families patch damage with whatever material they have. Sewing cloth over tears or applying mixtures meant to improve water resistance. Some emigrants treat canvas with oil, wax, paint, or other compounds before departure. Recipes vary, and results vary too. A cover may resist water while becoming heavier or more brittle. Certain treatments leave strong odors. Imagine trying to fall asleep inside something that smells faintly of wet rope, linseed oil, smoke, and oxen. It is not a fragrance likely to become a fashionable candle, though history has produced stranger products. You run your fingers over a patch section above your head. The stitches are uneven but firm. Someone repaired this tear after a branch caught the wagon several weeks earlier. At the time, the damage seemed small. Tonight, that patch prevents snow dust from blowing directly onto your face. Survival often depends on work whose value becomes clear only later. Curtains and partitions also give a little privacy. A blanket hung across the wagon can separate sleeping children from adults, or conceal someone changing clothes. Yet its greater winter value is thermal. By making the occupied area smaller, it keeps body warmth from spreading through the entire wagon. You settle into the enclosed portion, while supplies remain on the colder side. The difference is subtle but real. Your breath no longer vanishes immediately into the full space. The air close to the bedding grows less sharp. The floor remains cold, and the canvas still moves, but the wind has lost its direct path. Outside, a gust presses hard against the wagon, the bows creak, the cloth bellies inward, then relaxes. A loose tie taps against the side with a patient rhythm. You listen for changes, because a new sound may mean a knot has slipped or a patch has opened. Someone climbs out to tighten a rope, muttering softly about the weather and perhaps about the person who tied it earlier. Inside, you tuck another strip of cloth into a seam. Your fingers work slowly in the dim light. A child sleeps beneath two quilts, one hand resting near the face. Frost forms along the edge of a metal trunk. The cold remains present, but no longer completely in command. You begin to understand the canvas wagon not as a finished shelter, but as something rebuilt every night. Blankets become walls, sacks become seals, curtains become insulation. Every gap is studied, every scrap considered. Warmth is assembled from ordinary objects and careful attention, one blocked draft at a time. The wind has lost some of its power inside the patched wagon, yet warmth still depends on what burns outside. Canvas and blankets can slow the cold, but they cannot create heat for that. Your family turns toward the small circle of light beside the wheels, where sparks rise into darkness and vanish almost at once. A campfire on the open plains is not the cheerful, effortless blaze shown in paintings. It takes time, fuel, protection, and constant attention. The ground may be frozen, the grass may be damp, the air may rush so hard that a flame bends flat and dies before it catches. Even when the fire survives, it often burns low because fuel is too scarce to waste. You kneel beside a shallow fire pit while another traveller shields a match from the wind. Matches exist during the great years of westward migration, but they are not always dependable. Some are expensive, some are damaged by moisture, and some flare unpredictably. Flint and steel remain useful, especially for families who trust older methods. A spark lands in a nest of dry grass and shredded cloth. Smoke curls upward. Everyone leans closer, silently encouraging the tiny glow as if it were a stubborn child learning to walk. The first flame is fragile. You feed it twigs no thicker than a finger, then come larger sticks, each placed carefully enough to leave space for air. Too much fuel at once can smother the beginning. Too little lets it fade. It is a quiet lesson in patience, performed while your hands ache and your nose grows numb. One widely recorded reality of the Oregon Trail is that timber disappears across long stretches of prairie. Travelers who leave wooded country behind cannot assume that another convenient pile of firewood waits at the next campsite, along river valleys. Cottonwood and willow may be found, though much of it is green, twisted, or difficult to split on treeless plains. families collect whatever will burn. You begin gathering fuel long before the wagon stops. Children walk near the road looking for broken branches, dry roots, abandoned scraps, and anything left by earlier parties. A piece of wood too small to interest you at home becomes valuable here. Nothing useful is ignored. A cracked box lid may be burned if it cannot be repaired. A broken tool handle may meet the same fate. Even bits of rope or worn fabric can help a reluctant flame begin. The work has a rhythm. Someone scouts ahead. Someone bends to pick up fuel and carries it beneath an arm. Someone complains that the bundle is too heavy, then adds one more stick anyway, by evening. The family may possess only enough material for cooking and a brief period of heat. There is rarely fuel for a fire that burns generously through the night. Open prairie wind changes everything. You build the fire near the sheltered side of the wagon, but not so close that sparks can reach the canvas. A low bank of earth, stones, or packed snow can break the gusts. Pots, crates, and wagon wheels may offer partial protection, though every arrangement must avoid trapping sparks near dry cloth. One unusual practice is the use of a coat, blanket, or even a broad hat as a temporary windshield while a fire is being started. This is not recommended near a strong flame, naturally, unless you enjoy turning your only coat into a brief historical experiment. Yet while the tinder is merely smoking, a careful barrier can make the difference between success and another cold attempt. Disagreement remains among researchers about how often emigrants maintained night fires for warmth rather than allowing them to die after supper. Some accounts describe fires watched in turns during bitter weather. Others suggest that fuel shortages made this impossible in many places. The answer probably changes with terrain, season, wealth, health, and the size of the travelling company. A family beside a wooded river has options that a family on a bare plain simply does not. Once the fire grows steady, its heat changes the entire camp. Faces soften in the orange light. Frozen fingers begin to sting as feeling returns. Wet hems steam. A kettle settles over the coals. The smell of smoke enters every garment and will remain there for days. It clings to hair, quilts, food sacks, and canvas. By the end of the journey, smoke becomes part of the family itself. You notice that people do not sit in a perfect circle. They crowd the sheltered side, turning slowly as one part of the body warms and another cools. Boots are extended toward the flames, then pulled back before the leather dries too quickly and cracks. Mittens are held near the heat. Socks hang from sticks. Every item must be watched, because wool can scorch and sparks can leap without warning. The fire also becomes a place of work. A broken strap is softened and repaired. A spoon is cleaned. A cup of water is warmed for a child. A woman stitches a torn sleeve where the light is strongest. An older man studies the sky and pretends to know exactly what tomorrow's weather will be. His confidence is impressive. The clouds remain unconvinced. Keeping the fire alive requires more than adding wood. Coals are protected because they are easier to revive than starting again from nothing before sleep. Glowing embers may be gathered together and covered lightly with ash. The ash slows their cooling while still allowing enough air to remain. In the morning, someone brushes the ash aside and searches for a red point of life. A covered coal carried from one camp to another can save effort. Though moving live fire has obvious risks, embers might be placed in a metal container with ash or carried in a prepared bundle. Such methods are old and practical, but one careless jolt could create excitement of the worst kind. Most families balance convenience against the danger of setting supplies, grass, or wagon canvas alight. You hold your hands over the fire and feel the heat touch your palms while your back remains cold. This is the peculiar unfairness of an outdoor blaze. One side of you becomes almost comfortable. The other side remembers winter. You turn. then turn again, rotating like a very tired piece of bread. Food preparation competes with personal warmth. The pot must occupy the best position above the coals. A coffee kettle claims another place, if bread or meat must be cooked. Everyone waits. No one can simply build a second fire unless enough fuel has been gathered. Heat is budgeted with the same care as flour. The smallest children are kept close, but not too close. Their clothing can catch sparks, and tired children make sudden movements. An adult keeps one hand ready while another tends the pot. Babies may be held beneath shawls, their faces turned away from smoke. The fire comforts, but it also demands respect. Smoke is another problem. A low fire in damp weather can produce more smoke than flame. It crawls under the wagon, stings eyes, and fills the shelter. People cough and shift position. If the wind changes, the entire camp may move around the blaze in a slow, irritated dance. No one looks dignified. History is full of grand migration, but also of people blinking through smoke while trying not to spill supper. As the evening deepens, fuel is added more cautiously. Large flames are no longer necessary. What matters now is a durable bed of coals. Thick pieces are placed where they will burn slowly. Ashes drawn around the edges. A final pot is warmed. Clothing is dried as much as possible before being taken inside. You watch the fire shrink from bright flame to red glow. Each coal pulses beneath a grey skin. The camp grows quieter, beyond the light. The plains seem endless and black. The wagon canvas moves softly behind you, no longer snapping so fiercely. This small fire cannot defeat the winter night. It can cook a meal, warm a blanket, dry a pair of socks, and send a little courage through tired bodies. That is enough. On the trail. Warmth is rarely abundant. It is gathered, guarded, and shared, one ember at a time. The red coals settle beneath their coat of ash, but the bundle of wood beside them is already shrinking. Out here, fuel is not merely something you gather, it is something you count. Each stick has a future purpose. One may heat the kettle, another may dry a mitten, a third may keep a child warm for 10 more minutes before sleep. When the last branch is gone, the plains do not kindly provide another, so your eyes turn toward the ground. Scattered across the grass are dark, flattened shapes left behind by the enormous herds that once moved through these regions. They are dry now, hardened by sun and wind, and they have become one of the most famous practical materials of overland travel. Buffalo chips, as emigrants commonly call them, are dried pieces of bison dung used as fuel where trees are scarce. This is not the part of pioneer life usually painted in golden sunset colours. You bend down, test one with a gloved hand, and discover that a properly dried chip is lighter than expected. It feels fibrous rather than wet. Grass passes through the animal, dries on the prairie, and leaves behind something that can burn with a slow, steady heat. The smell is earthy, but not nearly as dramatic as your modern imagination may suggest. Fresh dung is useless for this purpose. Only material dried thoroughly by weather will catch and burn well. Children often help collect it. They wander near the wagon route with sacks, baskets, aprons, or bare hands, gathering enough for the evening meal. The task becomes part of camp routine, as ordinary as carrying water or arranging bedding. A child who once complained about splitting kindling may now find that kindling was, in fact, a luxurious assignment. The broad historical truth is that buffalo chips become essential fuel across many treeless portions of the Central Plains. Emigrant diaries mention them repeatedly, sometimes with embarrassment at first and later with complete practicality. Once a family has crossed enough open country, delicacy fades, heat matters more than dignity, and supper does not cook itself. You carry a sack back toward camp. The chips knock together with a hollow sound. Near the fire, they are stacked where sparks cannot reach them too soon. One traveller breaks a larger piece into smaller sections. Another lays a few over glowing coals. They smoke, darken, and begin to burn. The flame is usually modest. Buffalo chips tend to produce steady heat rather than a tall blaze, especially when packed closely. That makes them useful beneath cooking pots. The smoke can be thick, though dry chips may burn more cleanly than damp wood. Wind pushes the scent through camp, mixing it with stew, wet wool, leather, and cold air. It is not exactly unpleasant after a while. It is simply the smell of survival. One peculiar detail is that some travellers reportedly praise buffalo chip fires for their dependable cooking heat. Even while making jokes about the fuel itself, human beings can adapt to almost anything if they are allowed to complain creatively. A person may hold a biscuit over dried dung, declare the entire frontier uncivilized, and then eat the biscuit with great enthusiasm. The gathering process has its own little rules. Dry chips are preferred. Those sheltered beneath grass may retain moisture. Pieces frozen to the ground can be difficult to lift. In snow, children may search for dark patches and dig carefully. A sack kept under the wagon helps preserve the driest fuel for later use. You quickly learn not to waste the best chips on a large, showy fire. Their value lies in patience. A small pile beneath a kettle may last longer than scattered twigs. Ash can be pushed around the edges to hold heat, if wood is available. The two fuels can be combined, with chips sustaining the coals after the brighter flame falls. Some observers still dispute how pleasant or unpleasant these fires actually smell, since diary accounts range from disgust to casual approval. Weather, dryness, diet, and the sensitivity of the writer probably matter. A person who has spent weeks among oxen may also possess a very different definition of offensive odour from someone writing comfortably indoors. The chips are not always from bison. Cattle and oxen leave fuel too, especially along heavily travelled routes where grazing animals pass in great numbers. Dried cow dung has been used as fuel in many parts of the world for centuries on the Oregon Trail. Emigrants are participating in a much older human practice, even if some of them regard it as an amusing frontier novelty. You kneel beside the pot while the fire burns low and even. The heat reaches your face in soft waves, unlike resinous wood. The chips rarely crackle dramatically. They smoulder. Their quietness suits the night. A spoon moves through thick stew. Steam rises and disappears. Around you, other families tend similar fires, and the plain glows with small orange points. The connection between fuel and landscape becomes impossible to ignore. In wooded country, firewood can be chopped, split, and carried on open grassland. Every branch may have been gathered by earlier travellers. Bison herds, by contrast, leave fuel across enormous distances. Their presence shapes the daily habits of people who may never see the animals themselves. Sometimes you find tracks, hair caught on brush, or bones bleached pale beside the route. The herds may be miles away, yet their traces sustain the camp. That fact feels strange. An animal absent from sight still warms your food and dries your socks. Collection can become competitive when many wagons stop in the same area. Children spread outward in widening circles. Adults call them back before darkness thickens. A family arriving late may discover that the nearest ground has already been cleared. Then someone walks farther, carrying a sack and perhaps wondering whether westward expansion was worth this particular evening chore. The work also brings people into contact with the prairie at ground level. You notice the texture of frozen grass, the sharp smell of earth, the tiny tunnels of mice, and the way frost gathers beneath curled stems. You become aware of how much life exists below the grand horizon. The trail is not only mountains and rivers, it is hands searching through grass for anything that will burn. Back at the fire, a chip collapses into glowing fragments. Another is added. The kettle gives a low murmur. Someone places a flat piece beneath a pan to steady it. Someone else uses metal tongs, though many travellers simply employ sticks or a small shovel. A damp chip can sputter and smoke it may refuse to catch, forcing you to move it closer to the centre. Too many damp pieces together can weaken the fire, so each one is inspected, tapped, and broken. Experienced hands judge dryness by weight and sound. What began as an unpleasant necessity becomes another skill. The youngest child watches from a blanket near the wagon wheel. He asks whether the fire is dirty. His mother tells him the pot is clean, the stew is hot, and that is what matters. This answer satisfies him because he is hungry. You may smile, but the logic is difficult to challenge. By now the cold has deepened. Frost shines on the grass beyond the firelight. Your boots feel stiff at the toes. The buffalo chip fire does not cast much light, yet it gives enough heat to finish the meal. Hands stretch above it. A cup warms between two palms. Steam touches a face and vanishes. When the pot is lifted away, the remaining fuel is gathered close. Ash is drawn around the coals. A final chip is placed on top, not to create flame, but to preserve the red centre a little longer. The smell settles into clothing and canvas. Joining all the other scents the trail refuses to release. There is gentle irony in this. Families leave home carrying iron stoves, polished utensils, and careful ideas about respectability. Then the prairie teaches them to treasure dried dung. The lesson is not humiliation, it is adaptation. You look at the small glowing pile and understand that warmth does not always arrive in noble forms. Sometimes it lies unnoticed beneath the grass. Sometimes children collect it in sacks. Sometimes the least elegant object in the landscape becomes the thing that lets everyone eat before sleep. The last buffalo chip settles into a dull red glow, and now the family begins to think beyond the fire itself. Flames are useful while they burn, but they remain outside, restless and exposed to wind. The cleverer question is how to carry some of that heat inward without carrying the danger with it. You look toward the stones arranged near the edge of the coals. At first they appear ordinary, grey and dusty, no different from the countless rocks beside the trail. Yet after an hour near the fire, they hold warmth deep inside. Lifted carefully with tongs, a shovel, or a folded piece of heavy cloth, they become small reservoirs of borrowed heat, placed near cold feet or wrapped beneath bedding. They can soften the first harsh minutes of the night. The method is simple in theory. Choose a dry stone, warm it gradually, test it before bringing it near cloth or skin, wrap it securely, then place it where the heat can spread without scorching anything, in practice. Each of those steps contains an opportunity for trouble. A stone taken from a stream or damp ground may contain moisture, heated too quickly. That moisture can turn to steam and crack the rock. Sometimes with startling force. Experienced travellers prefer dry stones gathered well away from water. Dense, smooth rocks often hold heat better than light. Crumbly ones, though no one beside the wagon is conducting a formal geological survey. You judge by touch, weight, and the advice of whoever has made the fewest mistakes. The warming must be slow. A stone pushed directly into fierce flame may become dangerously hot on one side while remaining cooler within. Placed at the edge of the coals, it heats more evenly. Someone turns it with a stick. Someone else warns that it has been there too long. A third person claims to know exactly when it is ready, which usually means everyone waits another minute and then checks for themselves. One established practice among emigrant families is the use of heated stones, bricks, or iron objects to warm bedding and feet. This custom does not begin on the Oregon Trail. People in Europe and North America have long used warming pans, hot bricks, ceramic bottles, and heated stones during cold weather. The wagon simply turns an old household habit into a portable survival technique. You spread a wool blanket on the wagon floor. A warmed stone is lifted from the fire and placed on the ground for a moment while ash is brushed away. The surface radiates heat so strongly that you feel it through your gloves. It is wrapped first in a scrap of cloth, then in another layer. Only after careful testing is it carried inside. The wagon receives it like a tiny sun. Set beneath the blankets near the foot of the sleeping space, the stone begins warming the trapped air. Cold cloth loses some of its bite. Stiff toes can approach gradually. A child reaches toward it and is told not to touch. The warning is repeated. The child reaches again, because history does not improve the judgment of sleepy children. One odd little habit is to place a warmed brick inside a thick sock before slipping it into bed. The sock provides a washable cover and keeps soot from spreading through the bedding. It also gives the brick the appearance of a strangely heavy foot. In darkness, someone may kick it, mistake it for a person, and apologize before realizing the object has no feelings. Iron can store heat as well. A flat iron used for pressing clothing may be warmed near the fire, wrapped, and placed beneath blankets. A skillet or metal plate can serve a similar purpose. Though bare metal must be treated with extreme caution, it heats quickly, cools differently from stone, and can scorch cloth before anyone notices. Metal also carries another risk. It may feel tolerable through one layer when first tested, then become painfully hot under the pressure of a body or beneath thick bedding. Families learn to add more wrapping than seems necessary. A burned blanket is inconvenient. A burned foot on the trail is far worse. Experts remain divided over how widespread the use of heated rocks inside emigrant wagons truly was, since many diaries focus on weather, distance, illness, and livestock rather than the small routines of bedtime. Some scholars believe the practice was common but rarely recorded because it seemed ordinary. Others suggest it depended heavily on family background, available materials, and the severity of the cold. What the written record does show is that emigrants rely constantly on adaptation. Household objects take on new purposes. A brick carried for weight or balance becomes a bed warmer. A flat iron becomes a source of comfort. A cooking stone becomes a nighttime companion. The trail rewards anyone willing to look at an object and ask what else it can do. Hot water offers another way to store heat. Though suitable containers are not always available, a metal bottle, sturdy crock, or tightly sealed vessel can be filled and wrapped. Glass is risky because sudden temperature changes may crack it. Thin tin cools quickly and can leak. Pottery may break on rough roads. A dependable hot water bottle is therefore valuable, even when it looks nothing like the rubber version familiar today. You watch water steam in a small container near the coals. It is poured carefully into a metal vessel, which is checked twice for leaks. The stopper is secured with cloth. Then the whole thing is wrapped and placed near the youngest child. The warmth is gentler than the stone and spreads differently. Water gives up its heat steadily. It conforms slightly to the bedding, yet it also introduces moisture, the enemy you've worked so hard to keep away. One loose stopper can turn a warm nest into a damp misery. For that reason, the vessel is inspected again before anyone settles down. Coals themselves can preserve heat, but bringing live embers inside the wagon is dangerous. Carbon monoxide is not named or understood in modern terms by most emigrants, yet people know that smoke in a closed shelter can sicken or kill. Canvas catches fire easily. Bedding burns. So glowing coals are generally kept outside, contained in a brazier, pan, or carefully banked fire. Some travellers may place a metal pan of coals near the wagon opening for a brief period, allowing warmth to drift inside while keeping ventilation open. This demands constant supervision. No one sleeps beside it. No one leaves it beneath canvas. The temptation is obvious on a bitter night, but so is the danger. You feel the contrast when you step from the fire into the wagon. Outside, heat strikes only the side facing the coals. Inside, the wrapped stone gives less warmth, but it is close, steady, and protected from wind. It does not flicker. It does not fill your eyes with smoke. It asks only to be handled wisely. Several stones can be rotated through the evening. One warms bedding while another remains near the fire. Larger families may assign one to each sleeping area. Children receive smaller pieces. Adults take whatever heat remains. The oldest traveller may claim not to need one, then quietly pull it closer after everyone stops watching. Timing matters. Bring the stone in too early, and much of its heat disappears before sleep. Wait too long, and the fire may be too weak to warm it properly. The family begins preparing just as supper ends. By the time blankets are arranged and clothing is changed, the stones are ready. You press your palm against the wrapped surface. It is comfortably warm now, no longer fierce. The heat moves through the cloth and into your skin. For a few moments, you imagine a proper bedroom with a hearth, shutters, and a mattress that does not shift whenever someone turns over. Then the wagon creaks, and the illusion gently collapses. Still, the stored warmth changes the mood. People settle more easily, feet stop aching, a child's breathing becomes slower. The air remains cold near the canvas, but beneath the blankets there is a small pocket of comfort. Outside, the coals fade beneath ash. Inside, their memory remains in stone, iron, and water. The family has taken a little of the fire and persuaded it to stay after the flames are gone. The wrapped stone rests near your feet, giving back the last warmth of the fire. But now the family turns to the deeper question of the night. Heat can be carried into the wagon, yet it will disappear quickly unless the bedding knows how to hold it. So the sleeping place is built in layers. Nothing begins with comfort, it begins with the floor. The wagon bed is made of wood, and wood can become bitterly cold after sunset. Every board seems to draw warmth downward if you lie directly upon it, even beneath a blanket. The chill rises through your back and shoulders until sleep becomes a stubborn contest. To slow that cold, the family lays down whatever can create distance between bodies and boards. Sacks of clothing are flattened. Folded quilts are spread. Straw may be stuffed into a mattress tick. Spare canvas, rugs, coats, and wool blankets form the lower layers. The goal is not softness alone. It is insulation. A common feather bed, carried from home with great optimism, can become one of the most valuable objects in the wagon. Feather ticks are heavy and bulky, which is inconvenient while travelling, but they trap air beautifully. That trapped air slows the loss of body heat. Families who can spare the room may carry one large feather mattress or several smaller feather pillows and ticks. At the beginning of the journey, such bedding may seem like a sentimental luxury. By the first freezing night, no one laughs at it. You help drag the feather tick from beneath a stack of boxes. It has compressed during the day and must be shaken. The feathers shift inside with a soft rustling sound. Dust rises. One corner smells faintly of smoke, and another carries the scent of old lavender from a home now hundreds of miles behind you. The mattress is laid across the wagon bed. Though it does not fit neatly, nothing fits neatly. A trunk intrudes at one end, a barrel occupies the other. The tick bends around both. Children will sleep across the widest portion, while adults take the edges and any space left between supplies. The accepted historical record shows that emigrants often carried quilts, blankets, feather beds, and straw-filled ticks as part of their household goods. These items appear in packing lists, diaries, and recollections because bedding serves several purposes. It cushions people during rest, protects fragile possessions during travel, and becomes insulation when cold weather arrives. Straw bedding is especially practical because it can sometimes be replaced along the route. A cloth sack or ticking case is filled with straw, dry grass, corn husks, or other plant material. Over time, the filling flattens and becomes dusty. It may collect insects. It can also absorb dampness and unpleasant smells with impressive enthusiasm. One unusual bedtime routine involves opening the tick, removing the old filling, and replacing it with fresher grass or straw when a suitable supply is found. The empty cloth case is easier to carry than a permanent mattress. It is a clever arrangement. Though gathering clean, dry filling in freezing weather is not the soothing household task you might imagine. You kneel beside the bedding and smooth the lower blanket. The wool feels coarse against your fingers. Wool remains useful even when slightly damp because its fibres can still trap warmth. Cotton feels softer but loses much of its comfort when wet. Families therefore value wool blankets highly, though good ones are expensive and often too precious to use carelessly. The layering follows a rough logic. Coarse materials go below, softer quilts and blankets go above. Damp pieces are kept away from the body whenever possible. A feather tick may form the centre. Additional quilts are folded over the sleepers. Coats and shawls cover gaps near shoulders and feet. There is no fitted sheet waiting politely in a drawer. Everything must be arranged each evening and packed again each morning. Bedding left open during travel collects dust. Bedding exposed too early at camp gathers frost. Bedding rolled while damp may sour, mildew, or freeze into a stiff mass. The family must judge exactly when to unpack it and when to put it away. Researchers still disagree about how frequently families slept inside their wagons rather than beneath them, beside them, or in tents. The answer shifts with weather, wagon size, family composition, and the amount of cargo. In mild conditions, adults often sleep outside to preserve space. During severe cold, more people crowd inside, even when doing so means lying among barrels, tools, and sacks of flour. Tonight, the wind makes the decision easy. The youngest children are placed toward the centre of the bed, where surrounding bodies and blankets offer greater warmth. Older children lie beside them. Adults take the outer positions, nearest the canvas walls and drafts. This arrangement is not always comfortable, but comfort is distributed according to need rather than fairness. You notice how carefully the blankets overlap. A gap no wider than a hand can release surprising amounts of warmth. One quilt is turned sideways to cover several people. Another is tucked beneath shoulders. A shawl fills the space near the wagon wall. Someone places a coat over the foot of the bed, where blankets tend to lift. Quilts carry stories as well as warmth. Their pieces may come from worn dresses, children's shirts, old curtains, or scraps saved over years. A single quilt can contain colours from several generations of family life under its patched surface. The trail feels briefly connected to kitchens, bedrooms, and sewing circles far away. Yet the wagon is hard on these treasured objects. Dust grinds into seams, sparks burn holes, rain darkens the fabric, mud stains the edges. A quilt once kept for visitors may now lie beneath muddy boots because the floor is freezing. Respectability yields to necessity once again. The bedding also has to protect against movement. Wagons creak and shift in the wind. A sleeper near the edge may roll against a box or wheel well. Pillows are wedged into corners. Rolled clothing forms barriers. A folded blanket softens the side of a trunk. The result resembles less a proper bed than a carefully padded nest. You lower yourself into it and feel the layers compress. At first, the blankets are cold, the feather tick gives beneath your weight. The wrapped stone rests near your feet. Another person settles beside you, and then another. Space disappears quickly. The air under the quilts begins to change. Breath, skin, and stored heat collect together. Your toes slowly relax. The cold remains above, around, and beneath the bedding. But the layered nest creates a narrow climate of its own. Someone whispers that the stone is too warm, it is moved a few inches. Someone else complains that the quilt is pulling away from one shoulder. An adult reaches across 3 bodies to adjust it. A child says there is no room, while occupying more room than anyone else. This is the domestic reality beneath the grand story of migration. The family is not conquering the continent at this moment. It is negotiating blanket ownership in the dark. The bedding must remain as dry as possible through the night. Wet boots are kept away. Snow is brushed from coats before anyone climbs inside. A damp garment may be hung near the wagon opening rather than placed beneath the quilts. Even a little moisture can spread through the layers and steal heat. Near dawn, frost may form along the outermost blanket where warm breath meets cold air. The top quilt can feel stiff in places, yet beneath it, the inner layers remain softer. Each material sacrifices a little comfort to protect the next. You listen as the wagon settles. Feather ticking rustles, wool scratches against canvas. Wind brushes the cover with long, steady strokes. Somewhere outside, an ox shifts and a chain clinks. The bed beneath you is uneven, crowded, smoky, and made from half the family's possessions. It is also warm enough. That is the quiet genius of the arrangement. No single blanket defeats the cold. No feather mattress performs a miracle. Warmth comes from accumulation, straw beneath wool, wool beneath feathers, feathers beneath quilts, quilts beneath coats, bodies close together. Every layer holds a fraction of heat, and those fractions add up. You draw the top quilt beneath your chin. The fabric smells of dust, ash, and home. The cold wagon remains all around you, but the nest at its centre has begun to breathe. The layered bedding holds its small island of warmth, but it works best only when everyone accepts the most awkward truth of the frozen wagon. Privacy is now a luxury, and personal space has quietly left the trail several hundred miles behind you. You lie shoulder to shoulder with people who have spent the entire day walking beside the same wagon. There is no graceful arrangement. One person curls near the flour sacks, another rests beside a wooden chest. A child lies across the widest part of the mattress, as though claiming a private estate. An adult takes the narrow outer edge, where the canvas wool presses cold against one sleeve. This closeness is not merely the result of limited room, it is a way of conserving heat. Each body warms the air immediately around it, when several people sleep beneath the same quilts. That warmth gathers rather than escaping into separate beds. The space beneath the covers becomes a shared chamber of breath, wool, feathers, and slowly relaxing muscles. Even a hand resting against another sleeve can reduce the feeling of isolation that comes with extreme cold. Across much of the Oregon Trail era, families commonly travel in wagons measuring only a few feet across and perhaps 10 or 11 feet along the bed. Much of that space is occupied by food, tools, clothing, cookware, and household goods during severe weather. Fitting several people inside requires careful arrangement and a willingness to bend knees in directions they were not designed to enjoy. You begin by placing the youngest children near the center. They lose heat faster and may not wake when blankets slip away. Adults settle around them, creating a living barrier against drafts. An older child may sleep near the rear opening, where a quick response is possible if an animal cries out or a gust loosens the flap. The oldest members of the family receive attention too. Age can make cold feel sharper, stiff joints ache against hard boards, circulation slows. A grandmother who insists that she's perfectly comfortable may still be given the warmest shawl and the safest place near the heated stone. She protests because protest is part of accepting kindness without appearing to need it. The arrangement creates a quiet order. Vulnerable bodies toward the centre, stronger bodies around the edges, blankets shared across as many people as possible, coats placed over exposed feet, pillows used only where they protect a head from a trunk or wagon bore. One curious sleeping custom involves placing children sideways across the adults rather than lengthwise beside them in a narrow wagon. This can make better use of the width. It also means that someone may wake with a small boot resting against the ribs. The child remains deeply asleep. Naturally, while the adult contemplates the complicated rewards of parenthood, such positions are adjusted through whispered negotiation. Move your knee. That is my blanket. Your elbow is in my back. No, the other elbow. The voices remain low because waking the youngest child would create a larger problem than enduring discomfort. Eventually everyone settles into a shape that no drawing of human anatomy would recommend. Historical interpreters continue to question how consistently entire families slept inside wagons during intense cold. Written recollections vary. Some describe crowded wagon interiors, while others mention tents, shelters, or beds beneath the wagon. Conditions decide much of the answer. Cargo may leave no room. Illness may force a person inside. Wind, rain, snow, and the presence of children all change the nightly pattern. A wagon company also creates options beyond the individual family. Close friends may combine sleeping arrangements. A widow and her children might join another household during severe weather. A sick traveller may be given the most protected place while healthy adults sleep outside under canvas or blankets. Warmth becomes communal rather than strictly private. You can hear the same pattern in neighbouring wagons. Canvas rustles, a baby cries briefly, then quiets. Someone coughs. A low voice tells a story until the words slow and fade. The camp is full of separate families, yet the sounds blend into one larger household beneath the night. Closeness offers emotional warmth as well. The trail is unfamiliar and often frightening. Darkness on the plains feels immense. Wind makes strange sounds through grass and canvas. Animals stamp outside. A distant howl may travel farther than expected. Sleeping beside familiar bodies gives reassurance, especially to children. You feel a small hand close around your sleeve. No words are spoken. The gesture simply confirms that someone known is still there. There are difficulties. Of course, illness spreads more easily in crowded spaces. A cough passes through the wagon. Lice and fleas find excellent opportunities. Damp breath collects beneath quilts. Clothing smells become concentrated after weeks on the road. Nobody carries the fragrance of a spring garden. This is where gentle romantic ideas of pioneer life become slightly less decorative. One traveller may smell of smoke, another of wet leather. A child may carry the unmistakable memory of an accident nobody wishes to discuss. The wagon holds all of it. Cold encourages closeness, and closeness encourages tolerance. Modesty must also be managed. Families often sleep in much of their clothing, which helps with warmth and reduces the need to undress in a cramped space. Outer garments may be loosened but not removed. Women use shawls, blankets, and hanging cloth as screens when changing is necessary. Men may step outside briefly, even in freezing air, simply to give others a moment of privacy. Within a family, standards adapt. What would feel improper at home becomes practical on the trail. People avert their eyes. Children are told to turn around. A blanket is held like a curtain. Everyone behaves as though the arrangement is perfectly ordinary, because pretending is sometimes a useful social skill. Observers of migration have long discussed whether crowded sleeping strengthen family bonds or increase tension. The answer is probably both. Shared hardship can create deep loyalty. Yet exhaustion removes patience. A person who has walked 15 miles in cold rain may not respond warmly when someone steals the quilt for the third time. Still, cooperation becomes unavoidable. When one person turns, several others must adjust. When a child wakes, someone makes room. When the heated stone cools, it is passed toward whoever needs it most. A single blanket can belong to 5 people at once, though each may privately believe it belongs mostly to them. Body heat works best when drafts are controlled and bedding remains dry. The family tucks quilts beneath shoulders and hips, sealing the warm air inside. Caps stay on heads, stockings remain on feet, hands disappear beneath folded arms or between knees. You notice how quickly the shared space warms compared with an empty wagon. The canvas above remains cold enough for frost, but beneath the quilts the temperature rises. Breath no longer feels sharp, muscles unclench. The heated stone becomes less important as living warmth replaces stored warmth. Outside, the fire is almost gone. Wind travels over the protected camp. Inside, 6 people form a tight cluster among the family possessions. The arrangement would horrify anyone accustomed to a large bedroom and a door that closes. Here, it feels sensible. You stop thinking of each body as taking space and begin thinking of it as producing warmth. Hours pass in shallow sleep. Someone snores softly. A child murmurs. The wagon creaks. Your leg goes numb, but moving it would disturb everyone. So you accept the situation with the weary dignity of a traveller who has lost many arguments to circumstance. Near dawn, the cold presses hardest against the outer canvas. The adults nearest the walls feel it first. They pull coats closer and make certain the children remain covered. No one announces this care. It happens through small movements in darkness. A quilt is lifted, a shoulder is covered. A warm hand checks a sleeping face. This is how the family endures the coldest hour, not through comfort, and certainly not through privacy, but through closeness that becomes protection. The wagon is crowded, the air is stale, and your back may never forgive the wooden chest beside it. Yet beneath the shared blankets, no one sleeps alone. Morning does not begin with comfort, it begins with fabric. Before you open your eyes fully, you feel the cold in the clothing wrapped around you. Wool stockings have twisted during the night. A sleeve is folded beneath your shoulder. The cap pulled low over your ears has left a mark across your forehead. Around you, the family stirs inside the cramped wagon, and every movement releases trapped warmth into colder air. You do not dress so much as reorganize what you're already wearing. Most nights, much of your clothing remains on your body because changing in a frozen wagon is inconvenient, immodest, and painfully cold. A shirt, wool trousers or layered skirts, stockings, and perhaps a waistcoat stay in place beneath the blankets. Outer garments loosen for sleep, then tighten again before anyone climbs outside. The result is not freshness, it is efficiency. Wool is among the most useful fibres available to emigrant families because it traps air and can still provide insulation when slightly damp. It scratches, holds smoke, and sometimes feels heavy enough to have opinions. But it serves the traveller better than thin cotton in bitter weather. A plain historical reality is that emigrants commonly rely on layered clothing made from wool, linen, cotton, flannel, and leather. Clothing is expensive, and each person owns far fewer changes than a modern traveller might pack for a weekend. Garments are mended repeatedly, passed between family members, and adapted as bodies grow or fabric wears thin. You reach for a coat hanging near the wagon opening. It is cold and stiff. During yesterday's travel, sleet darkened the shoulders, The fire dried the surface, but moisture remains deep in the seams. Pulling it on is like embracing a reluctant animal. At first, the coat steals warmth from your body, then your own heat begins to soften it. This is one of the unpleasant calculations of trail life. A damp garment may chill you, but leaving it off can be worse, so you wear it, move briskly, and trust that motion will finish the drying. Flannel becomes precious in such conditions. A flannel shirt or petticoat offers a soft layer close to the skin, holding warmth beneath heavier clothing. Women may wear several petticoats under long dresses, while men add shirts, vests, coats, and scarves. Children are wrapped in smaller versions of the same practical layers, often altered from adult garments. Nothing matches perfectly. Trousers are cut down from a father's old pair, sleeves come from different fabric, and mittens are knitted from leftover yarn. The trail is not a fashion promenade, though someone still keeps a clean collar for Sunday. One curious practice is stuffing dry grass, scraps of wool, or paper inside clothing to block wind and add insulation. A little material around the chest, wrists, or ankles can reduce drafts. It is not elegant, and paper rustles whenever you move, making you sound like a walk-in parcel. Still, elegance has little authority when the temperature drops. Feet demand the greatest attention. Boots spend the day in mud, snow, river water, and sweat. Leather absorbs moisture, then hardens overnight. If left too near the fire, it can shrink, crack, or scorch. If left too far away, it may freeze into a rigid shape. In the morning, you warm a boot with your hands, bend the leather slowly, and force your foot inside. Wet leather mixes with wool stockings, smoke, and the earthy odour of the wagon floor. No one comments because everyone contributes something. A second pair of stockings helps, provided it is not so tight that circulation suffers. Some families grease boots with tallow or oil to resist water. The treatment can help, though no coating makes footwear completely waterproof through repeated creek crossings and snow. Greased boots shine darkly near the fire and attract dust with impressive dedication. There remains disagreement among clothing historians about how consistently emigrants carried specialized winter garments. Since many parties expect to complete the journey before severe cold, some families pack heavy coats from the beginning. Others begin with clothing suited to spring and summer, then discover in the mountains that optimism is not insulation. Money matters as much as planning. One household owns thick coats and spare boots. Another patches thin garments and layers everything available. The cold treats both with equal indifference. You watch a woman examine a tear near her hem. She threads a needle near the coals, her stiff fingers moving slowly, then sews on a patch cut from a worn apron. Mending is constant. Knees wear through, buttons disappear, seams split when someone lifts a barrel or climbs a slope. A coat may be recut and lined with pieces from another garment. Every scrap is saved because even a strip of cloth can wrap a wrist, cover a hole, or become a child's mitten. Spare stockings may be wrapped in cloth and hidden in a trunk. A dry pair is a small treasure, though wearing it risks losing that reserve. The choice is between comfort now and security later. Caps and bonnets matter because an uncovered head and ears suffer quickly in wind. Men pull wool caps low, women tie bonnets, hoods, or shawls beneath the chin. Children resist anything that feels tight, then complain when their ears hurt. Scarves protect the neck and lower face in severe wind. You draw wool over your mouth and breathe through it. Moisture from your breath freezes in the fibres, forming a pale crust. The cloth grows stiff, and your eyelashes collect tiny beads of frost. Gloves and mittens offer another compromise. Gloves allow more precise work, but mittens keep fingers warmer by holding them together. A traveller may wear thin gloves inside larger mittens, removing the outer layer to tie knots or handle tools. when fingers become numb, buckles resist, buttons seem smaller, and needles become almost impossible. Clothing changes with activity. Walking and climbing produce heat, but heavy layers encourage sweat, and damp fabric chills quickly once you stop. Experienced travellers loosen coats while working, then close them before resting. A coat tied around the waist catches on brush. A shawl placed in the wagon becomes buried beneath supplies. A child removes mittens and loses one before noon. The family searches because a single mitten cannot be dismissed as easily as a modern accessory. By afternoon, garments carry the weather of the entire day. Dust settles into damp hems. Snow melts on shoulders. Smoke returns at the next camp. Clothing records every mile in stains, tears, and odours. As evening approaches, socks return to the fire, boots are turned, and coats are spread near the warmth. Nothing is left unattended. One spark can ruin the only warm sleeve you own. You hold a stocking near the coals and feel steam rise against your fingers. It is not fully dry, but it is drier than before on the Oregon Trail. That often counts as success. When darkness gathers, you pull the same layers close once more. The fabric is worn, patched, smoky, and only partly dry, yet it shields the skin, traps precious air, and carries you into another frozen night. The damp stocking gives off its last thin curl of steam, and beside it the supper pot begins to murmur. Warm clothing helps you keep heat, but food gives the body something to burn from within. After a day of walking, lifting, pushing, gathering, and shivering, the evening meal becomes more than comfort. It is fuel in the most literal sense. You sit near the fire while the lid trembles softly on the pot. Inside, beans, salt pork, onions, and a little flour have become a thick stew. The smell moves through camp and wakes every tired appetite. Smoke drifts across the wagon wheels. A child asks when it will be ready. The answer is soon, which on the trail can mean anything from 5 minutes to half an hour. Hot food matters because digestion and calories help the body maintain temperature. People do not describe the process in scientific terms, but they understand the result. A full stomach makes the cold easier to bear. A cup of something warm restores feeling to hands. Grease, starch, and protein are prized because they provide lasting energy for the next morning. One familiar fact of overland travel is that flour, bacon, beans, coffee, sugar, salt, and dried fruit form the core of many emigrant food supplies. These foods travel reasonably well, offer dense nourishment, and can be prepared with simple equipment. Fresh meat and vegetables appear when hunting, trading, or local conditions allow, but they cannot be relied upon every day. The evening meal often begins long before camp. Beans may soak while the wagon moves, sealed inside a container that bumps and sloshes with every rut. Dough may be mixed quickly at the fire. Bacon is sliced sparingly because the journey ahead remains long. A spoonful of sugar can lift spirits, but the bag grows lighter each week. You watch the cook stir the pot with a wooden spoon worn smooth by use. The stew is not refined. It is thick enough to cling to the spoon and smoky enough to taste of the entire camp. That is considered an advantage. Thin soup cools too quickly. A dense meal holds warmth longer and settles heavily in the stomach. Bread is another source of comfort when there is no oven. Dough can be baked in a covered iron pot, fried in grease, wrapped around a stick, or cooked as small cakes on a griddle. The result may be crisp at the edges, raw in the centre, and still eaten with complete gratitude. A slightly eccentric trail trick involves placing dough beneath an upturned iron lid and piling hot coals above it. Creating a rough oven, the cook judges heat by instinct, smell, and experience rather than a dial, if the bread burns. The darkest part is scraped away and the rest is declared perfectly good. Hunger is a forgiving food critic. You receive a metal bowl filled almost to the rim. Heat passes through it quickly. You shift it from one hand to the other, then wrap your fingers around the sides despite the sting. Steam touches your face. The first spoonful is too hot, but you swallow it anyway because waiting feels unreasonable. Around you, conversation slows. Eating requires attention. People bend over bowls, protecting them from wind and wandering dogs. The youngest child drops a piece of bread, looks at the ground, then at the adults, and decides the 5-second rule has always existed. The stew warms your mouth, throat, and chest. It is easy to understand why a hot supper changes morale. Cold reduces the world to discomfort. Food expands it again. People begin to joke. Someone remembers a meal from home. Someone else claims this stew is nearly as good, which everyone recognizes as kindness rather than evidence. Specialists remain divided on how often emigrants enjoyed truly hot evening meals during severe weather. Some diaries describe regular cooking even in difficult conditions. Others mention days when wind, rain, exhaustion, or lack of fuel forced families to eat cold provisions. The difference may depend on wealth, skill, fuel, health, and simple luck. A fire suitable for cooking must be managed carefully. Too high a flame scorches the pot. Too weak a bed of coals leaves beans hard. Buffalo chips provide steady heat, though they demand patience. Wood burns brighter but may disappear quickly. The cook shifts the pot, adds fuel, and guards every ember as though conducting a small orchestra of smoke. Coffee occupies a special place in camp life. Real coffee is carried when families can afford it, often as green beans that must be roasted, ground, and boiled. The process takes time. In leaner moments, roasted grain, chicory, peas, or other substitutes may create a dark drink that resembles coffee in colour and optimism. The kettle near you contains a mixture of real coffee and roasted barley. It tastes bitter, smoky, and slightly mysterious. Sugar improves it, if sugar is available. Milk is rare unless a family travels with a cow that still gives enough. Adults cradle their cups for warmth as much as for flavour. The metal rim grows hot. Steam rises beneath cold noses. Coffee sharpens tired minds during night watches, though too much may make sleep difficult, which is unfortunate when every available minute of rest matters. Children receive warm water, milk when possible, or weak broth. A little molasses may be stirred into hot water. Dried apples can be simmered into a sweet drink. Even plain heated water offers comfort when held between cold hands. Fat is especially valuable in winter. Bacon grease is saved for frying, seasoning beans, and enriching bread. Nothing is discarded casually. A spoonful of grease adds calories and makes a plain meal more satisfying. Modern tastes may hesitate, but after a day of cold wind, the body welcomes generosity. You notice that portions are not always equal. Children may receive softer food. A sick person gets broth. The strongest workers may need more. Though supplies must last, mothers often serve everyone else before themselves, then eat what remains. Such quiet sacrifice appears rarely in grand accounts of migration, yet it shapes daily survival. Salt prevents food from becoming unbearably dull and helps preserve meat. Too much salted pork, however, creates thirst, and water may be limited or frozen. The cook balances flavour, preservation, and the practical question of how many buckets must be carried before bed. Dried fruit offers sweetness and helps prevent the misery caused by a monotonous diet. Apples, peaches, and berries can be stewed until soft. The fragrance briefly transforms the wagon camp, for a moment. The air smells less like smoke and animals and more like a kitchen remembered from home. One evening treat may be a simple pudding made from flour, water, sugar, and dried fruit. It is heavy, lumpy, and deeply appreciated. A child scrapes the pot with a spoon, an adult pretends not to notice. As the meal ends, bowls are cleaned with limited water, a piece of bread may wipe away the last grease before the dish is rinsed. The cooking pot is set aside for morning, leftovers are protected from animals and freezing, though frozen stew can become tomorrow's breakfast with enough heat and patience. You stand slowly, feeling the meal settle. The cold still touches your cheeks, but your hands are steadier. Warmth spreads from the centre of your body outward. The fire seems brighter, the wagon less bleak, and the coming night more manageable. Food cannot stop the wind or seal the canvas. It cannot guarantee survival through a storm, yet a bowl of hot stew, a thick slice of bread, and a bitter cup held close can restore courage in ways no speech can match. The family rises from the fire, carrying that warmth inside. Steam fades from the empty bowls. The pot quiets beneath coats and shawls. Every person brings a small reserve of heat toward the wagon, ready to spend it through the night. The warmth of supper travels with you beneath the wagon cover, where the youngest members of the family are already being arranged for the night. Adults can understand discomfort, make choices, and say when something feels wrong. Babies cannot. Small children may sleep through danger, kick away blankets, or grow quiet before anyone realizes how cold they have become. So the evening changes its rhythm around them. A baby is wrapped first in soft cloth, then in wool, then in a shawl that has already served as curtain, pillow, and windscreen. Only the face remains uncovered. The child is held close against an adult chest, where living warmth is steadier than any stone, beneath the blankets. The small body feels fragile and surprisingly warm, like a little stove that must also be protected from losing its own heat. Young children are placed near the centre of the bedding, as you remember, with older bodies forming a shield around them. Their caps stay on, stockings are checked, damp sleeves are replaced if anything dry can be found. A child who protests against another layer is ignored with the calm authority of a parent who has no interest in debating winter. The historical record makes one point especially clear. Children made up a significant portion of many emigrant companies travelling west, and some families began the journey with infants or welcomed new babies along the route. The trail was not populated only by strong young men with dramatic hats. It was full of mothers, toddlers, older children, grandparents, and people trying to maintain ordinary family life in extraordinary conditions. That ordinary life includes bedtime complaints. One child says the blanket scratches, another says the stone is too close. A third insists there is something moving inside the mattress. There may indeed be something moving inside the mattress, but this possibility is not explored at bedtime. Keeping a baby warm often begins with keeping the mother warm. An exhausted mother who is cold, hungry, or ill has fewer reserves to share. She receives hot food, extra covering, and the most protected seat when the family can manage it. Nursing places additional demands on the body, and milk supply may suffer under stress, poor diet, or sickness. Babies may be fed beneath shawls to protect them from drafts. The wagon is crowded, but fabric screens create a small pocket of privacy. Warm milk arrives at body temperature, one of the few comforts on the trail that requires no fire, no kettle, and no fuel. When nursing is impossible, families improvise. Cow's milk may be used if a milk animal travels with the company. Thin gruel, softened bread, or other substitutes appear in desperate circumstances. None is as dependable or safe as modern infant feeding, and containers are difficult to keep clean. One peculiar feeding device used in the 19th century is a small vessel fitted with a cloth teat, quill, or narrow spout. Such objects vary greatly in design and cleanliness. A rag dipped in milk may also be given for a baby to suck. It sounds simple, but cloth can hold dirt and bacteria, and cold weather makes washing and drying difficult, the same item intended to comfort a child can quietly create another danger. Researchers continue to debate how much infant suffering on overland routes came directly from exposure and how much resulted from infection, poor nutrition, dehydration, or several causes working together. Diaries often use broad words such as fever, weakness, or chill. Modern readers want precise diagnoses, but the writers did not always have them. For the family inside this wagon, diagnosis matters less than attention. A parent presses fingers against a baby's cheek and neck. Hands and feet may feel cold even when the body remains warm, so the chest is checked. Breathing is watched. The colour of the face is studied in the dim light. A sleeping infant is lifted gently, then placed back beneath the covers. Older children receive similar checks, though they may find them annoying. A mother touches foreheads, a father pulls blankets over exposed shoulders, a sister tucks a shawl around a younger brother who has somehow turned sideways and uncovered everyone else. Heated water can help. A well-sealed bottle or metal container wrapped in cloth is placed near a child's feet. The adults test it against their own skin first. Too much heat can burn. Too little is useless. The vessel is shifted as it cools, never left directly against bare skin. Warm stones serve the same purpose, but only with careful wrapping. Children are curious, and curiosity does not become wiser merely because the setting is historical. A small hand will search for the mysterious warm object under the quilt. For that reason, the stone may be placed beyond reach or beneath several layers. You hear the baby stir. The sound is small, no more than a breath followed by a soft complaint. Every adult wakes instantly. This alertness becomes part of nighttime survival. Sleep comes in fragments. One person rests while another remains partly awake. A parent listens for changes in breathing, cries from nearby wagons, movement among the animals, and the fading of the fire outside. In severe cold, night watches may be arranged among adults. The person on watch checks the camp, adds fuel when possible, inspects the wagon ties, and looks in on sleeping children. The duty is exhausting, especially after a day of travel, but it prevents small problems from becoming disasters. There is gentle irony in the title of Night Watch. It sounds official, almost military. In reality, it may involve a sleepy father wrapped in 2 coats, staring at a weak fire while holding a cup of bitter coffee and wondering why the moon appears personally hostile. Children also help care for one another. An older daughter may share her shawl with a toddler. A brother may carry a younger child when the ground is icy. During the day, older children gather fuel and water, leaving adults free to care for babies. Family warmth is built from many small acts, not only from parental vigilance. Yet childhood does not disappear. Children still play. They slide on frozen puddles, shape bits of snow, and laugh when breath forms clouds. They invent games among the wagons. Their energy can seem almost insulting to exhausted adults. That movement helps them stay warm, but it also soaks mittens, fills boots with snow, and creates new work before nightfall. Wet clothing is removed quickly when possible. A child wrapped in a blanket waits near the fire while stockings dry. If no dry replacement exists, the least damp pair is warmed and returned. Tears are wiped, complaints are soothed. The family treats the event as routine because panic would warm nobody. Infants may spend much of the day carried close to an adult body. A sling, shawl, or blanket keeps the child secure while leaving hands partly free. This shared warmth is valuable. Though walking over rough ground with a baby requires constant care, when wagons move through mountain cold, children may be allowed to ride more often, especially if they are very young or ill. The wagon interior is rough, but it protects them from wind. Adults walk beside the wheels, checking often. By night, everyone is tired beyond conversation. The baby has been fed. The youngest child has finally stopped asking questions. The warm vessel rests beneath the bedding. A cap has slipped over one small eyebrow. You watch a mother remain awake after everyone else settles. She listens, touches child's shoulder, then listens again. Her own eyes close for a moment before opening. This is one of the quiet truths of the frozen trail. Warmth for children often comes from an adult surrendering rest. Someone gives up the central place, the extra blanket, the warmer side of the bed, or the longest stretch of sleep. Outside. The wind brushes the wagon cover. Inside. A baby breathes against a wool shawl, surrounded by the heat of people who refuse to let the cold reach first. The baby settles at last, but the quiet inside the wagon is not complete. Somewhere beneath the blankets, another child coughs. It is a dry sound at first, then deeper, followed by the long pause of someone trying not to wake the others in a warm house. Such a cough might bring a cup of water and a little concern. Here, in a frozen wagon far from a doctor, every illness feels larger. You listen again. The cold does not cause every sickness. Though emigrants often speak of chills as if weather itself has entered the body, exposure weakens people already tired by walking, poor sleep, limited food, and damp clothing. Crowded bedding allows coughs and fevers to move easily through a family. Smoke irritates the lungs. Dust from the trail settles in throats. Water may carry disease. By the time someone begins to shiver, there are many possible reasons. A central truth of Oregon Trail history is that disease kills far more emigrants than attacks by people or wild animals. Cholera is especially feared during major outbreaks, while dysentery, measles, pneumonia, fever, and other illnesses also take a heavy toll. The popular image of the trail often focuses on dramatic danger, but the quieter threat usually begins with weakness, thirst, coughing, or pain. Inside your wagon, the first task is to decide whether the shivering comes from cold or fever. A hand touches the sick child's forehead. It feels warm, though the surrounding air is bitter. Another hand checks the neck. The child complains of aching legs and asks for water. The adults exchange a look that says more than either wishes to say aloud. The sleeping arrangement changes immediately. The child is moved nearer the center, but not so close to the baby that illness may pass between them. A separate blanket is found. The warm stone is shifted near the child's feet. A cup of heated water is offered slowly. Someone adds a little sugar, hoping energy will help. Rest is difficult on the trail because the wagon must keep moving. A family delayed too long risks running short of food or reaching mountain passes after heavy snow. Yet forcing a sick person onward can turn weakness into collapse. Every morning brings a decision: travel, wait, or send part of the company ahead. Medical care depends on what the family carries and whom they meet. Some wagon companies include a trained physician, though many do not. Others rely on a person with practical experience, a midwife, a former soldier, or the traveller who owns the largest medicine chest and therefore appears authoritative. That last qualification is not always reassuring. One curious item in many 19th century medicine kits is laudanum, a preparation containing opium. It may be used for pain, coughing, sleeplessness, or diarrhea. It can provide relief. But dosage is uncertain, and dependency is poorly understood. A few drops may calm a patient. Too much can make breathing dangerously slow. The label may offer guidance, though labels have never prevented human beings from believing that a little extra must work faster. Other remedies include camphor, quinine, calomel, castor oil, mustard plasters, herbs, vinegar, whiskey, and patent medicines promising to cure nearly everything short of a broken wagon axle. Calomel contains mercury and can cause serious harm. but many people trust it as a powerful purge. The treatment may leave the patient weaker than before, which is an unfortunate feature in medicine. You watch someone prepare a mustard plaster for the coughing child. Mustard powder is mixed into a paste, spread on cloth, and placed against the chest for a limited time. It creates heat and irritation on the skin. Some families believe this draws illness outward. The child dislikes the smell and says so with impressive clarity, which at least suggests a reasonable amount of strength remains. Medical historians remain divided over whether common trail remedies offered more comfort than cure, or whether a few provided genuine benefit when used carefully. Quinine can help malaria. Opium can reduce severe diarrhea and pain. Warm fluids, rest, and clean water are sensible, yet harmful purges. Contaminated mixtures and excessive dosing can worsen illness. The medicine chest is therefore a place of both hope and risk. Cold injuries bring different worries. Frostnip begins with pale, numb skin. Fingers, toes, ears, and noses are most vulnerable. Person may not notice the damage because numbness removes pain. Family members watch one another for white patches or unusual stiffness. Children are checked often because they may stay outside playing until their mittens are soaked and their fingers no longer feel cold at all. The safest response is gradual warming. Frozen skin should not be rubbed harshly, though older advice sometimes recommends rubbing with snow. That practice can damage tissue further. On the trail, knowledge varies. One traveller insists on snow, another prefers warm cloth, a third offers whiskey. Since whiskey appears in almost every 19th century discussion, whether useful or not, you bring cold hands near the fire, but not too close. As feeling returns, they burn and sting. The pain is unpleasant, yet it is also reassuring. Numbness lifting means warmth is reaching the skin. More serious exposure can leave a traveller confused, clumsy, and strangely sleepy. Someone who has been outside too long may insist on resting in the snow. The family must recognize that this calmness is dangerous. Coats are wrapped around the person. Wet garments are removed. Warm drinks are offered if swallowing remains safe. Bodies gather close to share heat. The wagon becomes a sick room. A blanket hangs across the interior to make a quieter space. Cups, spoons, cloths, and medicines collect near the patient. Bedding is turned and aired when possible. Waste must be removed quickly, even in freezing weather. Hands are washed when water permits, though nobody understands microbes in the modern way. Cleanliness is difficult but vital. A water bucket freezes at the rim. Cloths dry slowly. Soap is rationed. The person caring for the sick may become chilled while washing bedding outside. Illness creates more work precisely when the family has less strength to spare. Coughing worsens at night. Smoke from the fire clings inside the wagon, and cold air entering through the vent irritates the throat. Seal the wagon too tightly, and the air grows damp and stale. Open it too far, and the patient shivers. You adjust the flap by inches, trying to find a balance that does not truly exist. A feverish person may feel hot while everyone else is cold. Blankets are added, then removed. The patient sweats, and damp clothing must be changed before it chills the skin. Water is offered often. A little broth provides salt and energy. Someone sits nearby through the darkest hours, listening to each breath. The family also worries about contagion. Complete isolation is impossible, but cups may be kept separate. Bedding is not shared when alternatives exist. Children are told to stay back, then forget and come close anyway because the sick person is someone they love. Fear travels silently through the wagon. No one wants to say pneumonia. No one wants to remember the grave passed beside the trail 2 days earlier. No one wants to calculate how far the nearest settlement might be. Instead, the adults focus on the next small task: warm the water, dry the cloth, measure the medicine, check the breathing, add another layer. Morning comes slowly, grey light passing through the canvas. The child wakes and asks for bread. The request is modest, but everyone hears it as good news. A piece is softened in broth and offered carefully. The fever has not vanished. The cough remains, yet the child is awake, drinking, and annoyed by the mustard smell on the Oregon Trail. Hope often arrives in such ordinary forms. You pull the blanket closer around the patient and feel the wagon creak into another cold morning. Illness has made the shelter smaller, quieter, and more watchful. Warmth now means more than comfort. It means keeping the body strong enough to heal, guarding breath through the night, and refusing to let exhaustion silence the person who needs care. The child finishes a little bread, and relief passes quietly through the wagon, yet beyond the canvas. The morning has disappeared. Snow presses against the world in thick, slanting sheets. The nearest wagon is only a pale shape. The trail itself has vanished beneath smooth white drifts, and the horizon has folded inward until sky and ground seem to be made from the same cold material. You lift the rear flap only a few inches. Wind throws powder into your face at once. Snow grains strike your cheeks like sand. You close the opening and brush crystals from the blankets before they melt. Nothing moves outside except the storm. A snowstorm stops the ordinary machinery of trail life. Wheels cannot turn where drifts rise above the axles. Oxen struggle to find footing. Grass disappears beneath snow, leaving animals without easy grazing. Fuel becomes harder to gather, and every trip away from the wagons risks losing sight of camp. The family has spent weeks measuring progress in miles. Today, distance is measured in steps. Someone ties a rope from the wagon to the fire area so no one wanders into the white air and becomes disoriented. Another rope leads toward the animals. It seems excessive until you step outside and discover how quickly familiar shapes disappear. Within 10 paces, the wagon becomes a shadow. Within 20, it is gone. A major reality of Western migration is that emigrants who reached high country late in the season face severe danger from early snow. Mountain passes could close with little warning, while storms on the plains could halt wagon companies for days. The calendar mattered almost as much as food. Every delay earlier in the journey could place a family in colder country at a worse time. The snow gathers against the sheltered side of the wagon. It piles around the wheels and beneath the wagon bed, sealing some drafts while creating new problems. At first, the banked snow offers insulation. Later, if temperatures rise, it melts into slush that dampens wood, blankets, and boots. You begin clearing the wheels with a shovel. The work is slow. Snow falls into every space as quickly as you remove it. Your shoulders ache beneath the coat. Breath freezes along the scarf covering your mouth. Each shovelful feels heavier than the last. The wheels must remain visible in case the company decides to move. Snow packed around the hubs can freeze solid. Ice forms along the spokes. Axle grease stiffens. A wagon that stood ready yesterday now seems rooted to the earth. The oxen stand with backs turned toward the wind. Snow collects along their shoulders. Their breath clouds around their faces, and they stamp at the ground in search of grass. Feed carried in the wagon is limited, so families scrape snow aside, cut exposed grass where possible, or offer precious grain. Animals consume energy simply by staying warm. If the storm lasts, their strength declines. A weakened team may not be able to pull the wagon once the trail opens again. This creates the central question of the storm. Do you remain where you are, using food and fuel while waiting for safer weather? Or do you push forward before supplies run lower? Neither choice is comfortable. Waiting protects people from immediate exposure. It allows the sick child to rest. It avoids guiding animals through invisible ruts, ravines, and river edges. Yet every stationary day consumes flour, bacon, grain, and firewood without bringing the family closer to shelter. Moving offers progress, but progress may be an illusion if the trail cannot be found. One strange technique for locating a buried road is to probe the snow with a long stick. Searching for the hard-packed surface beneath, the trail has been compressed by thousands of hooves and wheels, so it may feel firmer than surrounding ground in shallow snow. This can help in a deep drift. You may probe repeatedly and discover only more snow, which is less useful than it sounds. Experienced travelers also look for landmarks. A line of trees may mark a river. A ridge may guide the company toward a pass. Wagon ruts, discarded goods, and old camp remains normally reveal the route, but the storm erases them. Compasses help with direction, though they cannot reveal cliffs, mud, ice, or safe crossings. A compass may tell you where west lies while remaining completely silent about the ravine directly ahead. There is continuing disagreement among historians about how often wagon companies became truly lost in snow, rather than merely delayed or temporarily uncertain. Diaries sometimes use the word lost for an hour of confusion, while other accounts describe companies wandering far from the established route. Memory can sharpen danger, and later retellings may make a storm seem more dramatic. Still, even brief uncertainty in freezing weather can be deadly. The leaders of the company gather between two wagons where the wind is slightly weaker. They speak loudly to be heard. One favors waiting. Another argues that the pass ahead may worsen if more snow falls. A third points toward the animals and says they cannot stand idle for many days. No one possesses enough information. The sky offers no forecast. The snow may stop by noon. It may continue through tomorrow. The temperature may rise, turning the trail into mud, or fall, freezing every wheel in place, inside the wagon. The family listens to fragments of the debate. The sick child sleeps beneath the quilt. The baby is held close. The remaining fuel is counted again. A decision is made to stay for one day. Relief and fear arrive together. The wagons are drawn as close as conditions allow. Fires are placed in sheltered pockets, though sparks must be watched carefully. Canvas screens and wagon sides block some wind. Snow is packed into low walls around the camp. The arrangement creates a shallow basin of calmer air. Cooking becomes difficult. Fuel is damp or buried. Buffalo chips collected earlier are brought from beneath the wagon, where they have remained mostly dry. The fire smoulders. Smoke curls close to the ground before the wind tears it away. A pot of thick porridge replaces a more elaborate meal. Flour, water, salt, and a little grease provide warmth and energy. Everyone eats slowly, aware that supplies must stretch. Snow also creates water, but melting it consumes fuel. A pot full of loose snow produces surprisingly little liquid. More is added again and again. Someone jokes that the storm has delivered an entire ocean that refuses to fit into a cup. Clothing grows damp despite every precaution. Snow clings to hems and boot soles. It melts inside the wagon. Cloths are laid near the entrance to absorb water. Boots are brushed before anyone climbs inside, though children forget and track white powder across the bedding. The hours pass without the usual movement of travel. People mend harness, sharpen tools, check food sacks, and tell stories. Rest should feel welcome, but enforced stillness creates tension. Every gust reminds you that the trail remains closed. By late afternoon, the wind weakens. The change is so gradual that nobody trusts it at first. Snow continues falling, but more softly. The nearest wagon becomes clear. Then the next. Dark shapes of oxen emerge through the grey air. Adults climb onto the drifts to study the sky. A pale strip appears in the west. Tomorrow may permit movement. Before night, paths are cleared between wagons, animals, and fire. Wheels are dug free. Ropes remain in place. The family prepares as though the storm might return. because optimism is pleasant but preparation keeps blankets dry. You settle beneath the quilts while snow slides from the canvas in soft sighs. The buried world outside is silent now. No wheels creak, no harness rattles, no footsteps mark the hidden road. For one day. The Oregon Trail has ceased to be a trail at all. It is only a line remembered beneath the snow, waiting for people patient enough to find it again. By morning, the storm has loosened its grip, but the road ahead rises into colder country. Snow still clings to the canvas and fills the wagon ruts, while the mountains stand beyond the camp in long white folds. They look quiet from a distance. Up close, they are steep, narrow, and entirely uninterested in your comfort. The company begins moving again. Oxen lean into their yokes, wheels groan against packed snow, men and women walk beside the wagons, pushing at the hubs when the animals lose traction. Children who are strong enough follow in careful steps, while the youngest remain inside beneath blankets and coats. Every upward mile makes the air sharper. On level ground, cold settles around you. On a mountain grade, it works together with exhaustion. Climbing produces sweat beneath your clothing, yet stopping allows that moisture to chill almost immediately. You loosen your coat while pushing, then close it again the moment the wagon pauses. The rhythm repeats until you feel as though you have spent the day dressing and undressing without ever becoming comfortable. The road narrows between slopes. Snow hides stones, roots, and deep holes. One wheel may rise while another sinks. The wagon tilts, and everyone reaches for ropes or sideboards inside. Barrels shift and dishes knock together. A central fact of Oregon Trail travel is that wagons often had to be lightened during difficult mountain crossings. Families removed cargo, carried possessions by hand, doubled teams, or discarded goods beside the road. Steep grades demanded more strength than tired animals could always provide. You see evidence of those decisions everywhere. A broken chair lies half buried near a tree. A stove rests beside the trail, too heavy to haul farther. A trunk has been opened and emptied, its lid frozen at an angle. Pieces of iron, cracked dishes, books, and tools appear beneath the snow like fragments of abandoned homes. Each object represents an argument that has already ended. Someone believed the stove was necessary. The mountain disagreed. Your family removes several sacks from the wagon and carries them uphill. Flour goes first because losing it would be foolish. Bedding follows because warmth matters more than furniture. A wooden chest is opened, and its contents are divided into smaller bundles. The chest itself may have to stay. No one likes the decision. It came from home. It held wedding clothes, letters, and small belongings packed with care. Yet the empty chest still weighs enough to slow the team. Sentiment must now negotiate with gravity. One peculiar mountain method involves using ropes tied to trees, rocks, or several people to help guide a wagon around a sharp turn. The wagon is not simply pulled forward. It may be steadied from the side, restrained from behind, and urged uphill, all at once. The process resembles a group trying to persuade a stubborn cupboard to climb a staircase. The ropes creak, boots slide. Someone shouts instructions that cannot be heard clearly above the wind. Another person repeats them incorrectly. The oxen continue with the patient expression of animals who have long accepted human confusion. At the steepest points, teams may be doubled. Oxen from one wagon are added to another, creating greater pulling power. This means some wagons wait while others climb. The company moves in stages, slowly transferring animals and assistants up the slope. Waiting is cold work. You stand beside a motionless wagon while the wind crosses the pass. There is a little shelter. Trees may be sparse or too far below. Fuel is scattered, damp or buried. The fire built at midday is no larger than a dinner plate. Hands gather around it anyway. The thin mountain air and constant wind make flames difficult to maintain. Dry pine burns quickly when found, releasing a sharp resinous smell. Dead branches from sheltered places are prized. Bark, roots, broken crates, and discarded furniture may all become fuel. A chair leg found beside the road burned surprisingly well. Its owner once expected it to stand in an Oregon kitchen. Instead, it warms 6 strangers for 12 minutes. This is not the future the carpenter imagined, but it is useful. Specialists still differ on how often emigrants entered the highest passes after conditions had already become dangerously cold. Some parties were delayed by illness, flooded rivers, damaged wagons, or poor grazing. Others may have underestimated distance or overestimated their pace. The surviving journals show both careful planning and astonishing optimism. What appears foolish from a comfortable room can feel reasonable on the trail. You cannot always turn back. Supplies behind you may be exhausted. Winter may close the eastern route as quickly as the western one. Forward motion becomes the only available hope, even when the road ahead looks worse. Exposure is especially dangerous above the tree line or on open ridges. Wind removes heat faster than still air. Frost forms along eyebrows and scarves. Fingers stiffen around ropes. A person who stops working may begin to shiver violently, then grow quiet. Quietness worries everyone. The company watches for confusion, stumbling, and unusual calm. A traveller who insists on sitting down is encouraged to keep moving. Someone takes the person's bundle. Another offers an arm. Warm drink is passed from a covered container when possible. The drink is barely warm by then. But barely warm can feel miraculous. Wagons descending the far side face a different danger. Uphill. The animals struggle to pull. Downhill. The wagon may roll too quickly and push into the team. Brakes are tightened. Wheels may be locked or dragged. Ropes are secured behind the wagon so people can restrain it. Cold makes every mechanical problem worse. Wood shrinks and swells. Iron becomes painful to touch. Grease stiffens. Brake blocks freeze. A rope wet with snow turns rigid. Knots that seemed simple in camp become nearly impossible with numb fingers. You work one knot loose by breathing on it and picking at the fibers through gloves. The process takes several minutes. Modern impatience would be useless here. The mountain requires slow hands and repeated effort. The descent begins. The wagon moves one careful length at a time. Snow compresses beneath the wheels. The brake groans. People hold the rear rope and dig their heels into the slope. The wagon tries to slide sideways, then settles back into the ruts. Inside. The children are told to remain still. This instruction has never been more important, which guarantees that one child asks for water immediately. The family cannot stop on the steeper section, so the request waits. The child is reminded that water is only a few minutes away. No one mentions that mountain minutes are elastic and may contain an entire argument with a wheel. By late afternoon, the company reaches a lower bench where trees offer some shelter. It is not the valley, but it is safer than the exposed pass. Wagons gather close. Animals are unhitched and rubbed down. Snow is cleared from the driest ground. Fuel parties move quickly among the trees. Fallen branches appear beneath the snow. Needles and bark provide tinder. Soon several fires burn, brighter than those on the open ridge. Steam rises from coats. Mittens hang near the heat. A kettle begins to sing. The change in mood is immediate. People who barely spoke during the descent begin to joke. Someone produces a small piece of dried apple and divides it among the children. Another traveller repairs a torn glove. The oxen chew slowly, their sides moving with deep breaths. Your own legs ache from holding ropes and pushing wheels. When you sit, the muscles tremble. Heat from the fire reaches your knees. The smell of pine smoke feels almost luxurious after the weak fires of the storm, yet the mountain still looms above. Snow clouds gather round its upper slopes, hiding the route you crossed only hours earlier. The trail behind has nearly vanished again. Had the company waited another day, the pass might have become impossible, or perhaps waiting would have been wiser. There is no way to know. That uncertainty is part of the journey. Survival does not always confirm that the decision was correct. Sometimes it only means the decision did not fail completely. As darkness settles, the family prepares the wagon in the familiar sequence. Wet clothing is turned near the fire. Stones warm beside the coals. Bedding is shaken and layered. Children are placed near the center. The canvas is checked for snow damage. Every action feels slower after the climb, still. The lower camp holds the wind at a distance. Trees creak overhead. Firelight reflects from the snow. The wagon rests on more level ground, its wheels blocked securely. You carry a warmed stone inside and place it beneath the blankets. The heat spreads gradually around you. The family settles with the heavy silence of complete exhaustion. The mountain has taken a chest, a chair leg, several hours of strength, and any remaining illusion that wagons simply roll westward. Yet it has not taken the family. Tonight, that is enough. The family settles beneath the blankets, but the warmth around this lower camp does not belong to one wagon alone. It moves from fire to fire, hand to hand, household to household, after the mountain. Everyone understands that private supplies may not be enough. A single family can gather wood, warm stones, and layer quilts. Yet severe cold has a way of turning independence into a very expensive idea. So the camp becomes more cooperative. One wagon has dry kindling, another has a larger iron pot, a third family owns an extra wool blanket. Someone else has strong oxen that can drag a stranded wagon into a better position. These things are traded, lent, shared, and occasionally argued over before being shared anyway. You step outside and see 3 fires burning close together. They are arranged in the shelter of the wagons, with enough space to keep sparks from reaching the canvas. Families gather around whichever flame is strongest. Nobody asks whether the heat belongs to them. Heat does not respect property lines, and tonight that is fortunate. The broader historical record shows that emigrants usually travelled in companies for practical support as well as companionship. Wagon groups could pool labour, repair equipment, organise watches, help with river crossings, and care for people who became sick. The company was not always harmonious, but cooperation often made the difference between delay and disaster. You notice this in the smallest tasks. One woman carries a pot of hot water toward another wagon. A man brings an armful of pine branches to a family whose fuel has run out. 2 older children lead a younger pair back from the edge of camp. A widow receives help tightening the cover over her wagon because the rope has frozen stiff. No speeches accompany these gestures. People simply see what needs doing. When the cold deepens, blankets move between families. A household with fewer children may lend a quilt to one with an infant. Someone who owns a buffalo robe spreads it over 2 sick travellers. An extra coat changes shoulders for the night. Such lending requires trust. A good blanket is valuable. It may have been made at home, carried for hundreds of miles, and repaired many times. Giving it away even temporarily means accepting that it could return torn, smoked, or not at all. Still, cold makes the calculation simple. One unusual custom is the creation of shared sleeping spaces inside the largest wagon or tent. Children from several households may be placed together in the warmest protected area, while adults take less comfortable positions. The resulting arrangement is noisy, crowded, and surprisingly effective. The children whisper for a while, delighted by the novelty. Then one of them complains that another is breathing too loudly. A third insists that somebody has taken the best corner. Within minutes, the warm communal refuge begins to resemble every crowded family bedtime in history. You help carry bedding into a neighbouring wagon, where the canvas is tighter and the floor less exposed. The youngest children are arranged in the middle. Quilts overlap. Warm stones are placed near the foot of the bed. Two mothers remain close, listening for coughs and adjusting blankets. Outside, adults prepare to sleep in less protected places. A tent is stretched between wagons. Canvas sheets form a lean shelter against the wind. Coats are spread beneath bodies to block the frozen ground. Men take turns near the fire, while older boys keep watch on the animals. Researchers continue to disagree about how formal these mutual aid arrangements usually were. Some wagon companies elected captains and adopted written rules, while others relied on informal agreements. Diaries describe both generous cooperation and bitter disputes. A traveller might share food one week, then quarrel over grazing rights the next. Human nature does not become noble simply because the landscape is dramatic. People argue over fuel. They accuse one another of taking the best campsite. They resent families who move too slowly. They complain that someone uses too much water, lets animals wander, or fails to gather enough wood. The same neighbour who lends a blanket at midnight may criticise your driving before breakfast. Yet hardship creates practical bonds even where affection is limited. You do not need to adore someone to help push their wagon. You do not need to approve of their manners to warm their child. You do not need to share their beliefs to share a fire. The night watch becomes a company duty, instead of every family sacrificing one exhausted adult. Several travellers divide the hours. One person checks the animals. Another walks between the wagons. A third tends the largest fire and listens for changes in the wind. The watch carries a lantern, though fuel for light is precious, often moonlight. Snow and glowing coals provide enough visibility. The watcher moves slowly, boots crunching across frozen ground. You take one of the early turns. The camp looks different when most people are asleep. Wagons become dark shapes. Canvas rises and falls softly in the wind. Fires pulse beneath ash. Horses and oxen shift, chains giving small metallic sounds. At one wagon, a flap has loosened. You retie it. At another, a child is crying. A parent wakes before you can call. Near the outer edge of camp, one ox stands apart from the others. You guide it back carefully, speaking in a low voice. The work is ordinary, but every small correction protects someone's warmth. Shared cooking also saves fuel. Instead of 5 families maintaining 5 separate fires, several pots can use one strong bed of coals. Stew, coffee, broth, and water take turns above the same heat. The arrangement requires patience and negotiation. Your pot waits behind 2 kettles and a pan of biscuits. Someone asks whether your stew is nearly done. You explain that it has not yet reached the fire. This produces laughter, which warms nothing physically but improves the evening. Food itself may be shared when supplies become uneven. A family delayed by illness may have less flour. Another may have lost bacon in a river crossing. Small contributions from several wagons can create a meal large enough for everyone. Such generosity is not limitless. Each household fears running short before reaching safety. Every cup of flour given away is a cup unavailable later, yet refusing help may leave a neighbour too weak to travel, which slows the entire company and burdens everyone. Cooperation becomes both moral and practical. The strongest adults cut fuel, those with sewing skill repair torn mittens and blankets. A person experienced with animals checks hooves and harness. Someone who knows herbal remedies visits the sick. Another reads aloud from a Bible, newspaper, or letter to calm the camp. The reading is slow. Firelight moves across the page. People listen while mending clothing or warming hands. Even those who disagree with the words enjoy the sound of a steady human voice. For a little while, the camp feels less like a line of strangers and more like a temporary village. There are celebrations too, modest but important. A child birthday may bring a spoonful of extra sugar. A safe crossing may be marked with a shared pudding. Someone produces a fiddle from a wagon, and though the instrument is cold and slightly out of tune, music travels between the fires. Dancing would be difficult in snow, but a few feet tap anyway. The tune ends quickly because fingers grow numb. Still, people smile. Warmth is not only the absence of cold, it is also the presence of company, familiar sounds, and the knowledge that another person is awake nearby. As the fires sink lower, borrowed blankets are carried to the wagons that need them most. The night watch takes position. Cooking pots are stacked. Children disappear beneath quilts. You return to your family's wagon and find an extra robe spread over the bedding. It belongs to neighbours whose names you barely knew a month ago. Tomorrow, you may disagree over pace, water, or the placement of animals. Tonight, their robe holds back the cold. You settle beneath it and listen to footsteps outside as the watcher passes, beyond the canvas. Several families breathe within the same sheltered ring of wagons. The trail has brought you westward, but the cold has brought everyone closer. The borrowed robe lies heavy across the bedding, and beyond the canvas the night watch continues its slow circuit. By morning, someone may record a few words about this cold camp in a diary. Perhaps the writer notes the mountain, the snow, the condition of the oxen, and the number of miles travelled. Perhaps the extra robe is never mentioned at all. That silence matters. You imagine a woman sitting near the weakest light, balancing a small book on her knee while the wagon creaks around her. Her fingers are stiff. Ink thickens in the cold. The family is tired, the fire is fading, and she has only a few minutes before sleep. She writes that the night was very cold. 4 words may contain hours of work. They may contain frozen boots, damp blankets, coughing children, smoke in the eyes, and a stone wrapped in cloth near someone's feet. They may contain a borrowed quilt, a shared kettle, and the quiet fear that the storm will return. Yet the page remains brief. Many surviving overland diaries record weather with remarkable regularity, because weather controls nearly every part of the journey. Rain changes roads to mud, heat weakens animals, wind tears canvas, frost threatens people and livestock. Snow closes passes. A note about temperature is rarely decorative. It explains why the company moves slowly, stops early, or loses another day. This is one of the clearest facts preserved in the written record. Emigrants frequently mention storms, freezing nights, wet bedding, scarce fuel, and difficult mountain conditions. Their journals do not always explain every warming method, but the cold appears again and again as a force shaping decisions. You lean closer to the imagined page. The handwriting is cramped to save paper. Some words slope upward because the wagon shifts, ink blots near the edge. A sentence begins confidently, then ends in an abbreviation because the candle is nearly gone. Paper is valuable, so is time. A diary writer cannot describe every sock placed near a fire or every blanket tucked around a child. Repetition would fill the book quickly. Once a task becomes ordinary, it often disappears from the record. The first buffalo chip fire may receive a full paragraph because it seems strange. The 20th may receive no mention at all. The first night sleeping 6 people inside one wagon may feel memorable. By the end of the journey, crowding becomes routine, even if it remains uncomfortable. This creates a challenge for anyone trying to understand how families truly kept warm. The sources preserve exceptional moments more readily than ordinary ones. A terrible blizzard receives attention. A successful evening of careful preparation may pass silently because nothing went wrong. Archivists have noticed another curious feature in some travel journals. Writers occasionally leave blank spaces where they intend to return later and add details. Sometimes they do, sometimes they never find the time. The empty patch remains, a small white interruption in the story. You can almost place a cold night there. Perhaps the wagon broke an axle. Perhaps a child was ill. Perhaps everyone was too exhausted to write. Or perhaps the missing detail was simply considered unimportant at the time. Some scholars propose that these journals understate hardship because emigrants expected discomfort and did not feel compelled to describe it fully. Others believe the most dramatic accounts may enlarge suffering, especially when rewritten years later for children, newspapers, or family histories. Memory does not remain perfectly still. It arranges events, sharpens certain scenes, and softens others. A recollection written 40 years after the journey may describe snow as deeper, wind as colder, and danger as closer than a diary written on the same evening. That does not make the memory useless. It makes it human. You listen as the wagon canvas moves and imagine an elderly traveller remembering the sound decades later, in a warm house in Oregon. The old creak of bows and cloth may return more vividly than the exact date. She may remember her mother placing heated bricks beneath the bedding. She may remember sleeping between two sisters. She may remember the smell of wet wool but forget the name of the stream where the family camped. Memory often preserves sensation better than measurement. This is why later reminiscences can reveal details missing from daily journals. Older pioneers describe how blankets were arranged, how children were wrapped, how snow entered through gaps, and how fires were guarded. Such accounts must be read carefully, but they provide texture that short diary entries lack. Researchers still debate whether women's journals offer a fuller view of domestic survival than men's journals, since women often record cooking, illness, children, laundry, bedding, and household labour in greater detail. The difference is not absolute. Some men write closely about family life, and some women focus on mileage and geography. Still, the division of labour can shape what each person notices. A man driving oxen may write that the company stopped because of snow. A woman preparing camp may write that every blanket was wet. Both describe the same day. Neither description is complete alone. Children leave fewer written accounts from the time of travel, though some later record memories of cold nights. Their recollections may focus on small things adults overlook: a lost mitten, a warm biscuit, the frightening sound of wind, the comfort of sleeping beside a mother, the unfairness of being told to gather fuel while adults discussed important matters. Such memories remind you that history is experienced at different heights. To an adult, the wagon is a shelter. To a child, it may be a dark wooden world filled with knees, sacks, boots, and whispered warnings. Official reports and guidebooks add another layer. They discuss routes, distances, rivers, supplies, and recommended departure times. Some advise travellers to carry strong blankets, warm clothing, and adequate provisions. Yet guidebooks often present order where reality offers confusion. They may suggest an ideal schedule that illness, weather, and broken equipment soon destroy. Advertisements are even more optimistic. An outfitter may promise that a certain stove, wagon cover, or waterproof garment will make travel easier. The claims sound confident. The trail remains unimpressed. There is a slightly comic pleasure in imagining a freezing emigrant remembering a merchant's assurance that the family was fully equipped. Somewhere behind the wagon sits a costly object that has proved useless, while an old flour sack blocks the draft more effectively. Material evidence helps fill the gaps left by writing. Museums preserve quilts, wagons, cooking pots, clothing, tools, and medicine chests associated with westward migration. Wear marks show how objects were used. Repairs reveal what families valued enough to save. Smoke stains, patched seams, and altered garments tell stories without sentences. Yet even objects can mislead. A beautiful quilt preserved by descendants may have remained packed safely through much of the journey, while a rough blanket used every night wore out and vanished. The things that survive are not always the things used most. That is one of history's quiet tricks. The ordinary is often consumed by ordinary life. Fuel burns, clothing tears, blankets rot, paper is lost. The most useful objects may leave the fewest traces, so you read between the lines. When a diary says the family rested poorly, you consider the cold floorboards and crowded bedding. When it says the team could not proceed, you imagine frozen harness and exhausted animals. When it records that a neighbour was kind, you wonder whether kindness arrived as food, firewood, medicine, or a heavy robe laid over sleeping children. The page rarely answers every question. That uncertainty does not empty the story. It invites careful attention. You begin to hear the silences as part of the evidence. A missing detail may mark routine, fatigue, modesty, grief, or simply the limits of ink and time. The historian's task is not to fill every silence with certainty, but to compare voices, objects, weather records, roots, and later memories until a pattern begins to emerge. The pattern is clear enough. Families kept warm through layers of labour so familiar that much of it went unwritten. They chose sheltered ground. They blocked canvas gaps. They gathered poor fuel. They warmed stones. They shared bedding. They fed children. They watched the sick. They depended on neighbours. A diary may reduce all of this to one plain sentence, very cold night. But all are well. You close the imagined book and feel the power of those final words. All are well, after everything the page does not say. That may be the most important record of warmth the trail can offer. The imagined diary closes, and the words all are well remain with you as the final night gives way to morning. At first, the change is barely visible. The canvas above turns from black to charcoal, then to a soft grey. Frost along the seams begins to shine. Outside, the wind has fallen quiet enough for you to hear water dripping from the wagon roof. The thaw arrives one drop at a time. You push aside the blanket and feel the cold waiting beyond it, though the cold has lost some of its sharpness. The heated stone near your feet is nearly cool. Bodies stir around you. A child wakes and asks whether the snow is gone, as though winter might have packed its belongings during the night and left without notice. You open the flap. Morning light spreads across a white camp. Smoke rises almost straight from the first rekindled fire. Snow has slipped from tree branches, leaving dark, wet bark exposed beneath the wagons. Small channels of meltwater begin to move through the ruts. The mountain is still there, but it no longer seems to press so heavily against the sky. A well-established part of the overland story is that most emigrant families depend on timing, cooperation, an ordinary household skill more than on dramatic act of heroism. Survival usually comes through repeated small decisions. A dry blanket matters, a repaired seam matters, a pot of hot food matters, a neighbour who notices trouble matters. You see the proof everywhere around the camp. One family shakes frost from a quilt, another warms stiff harness near the fire. A mother checks a sleeping child before folding the bedding. Two men clear ice from a wheel hub. An older woman pours hot water into a cup and passes it to someone who spent the night watch outside. None of these actions looks heroic. Together, they have carried people through the cold. The thaw creates new difficulties almost immediately. Snow softens beneath boots. Wagon wheels sink into mud. Canvas begins to drip. Blankets that stayed dry through the storm now risk becoming wet during packing. Everyone moves quickly, spreading cloth where sunlight reaches and lifting bedding away from melting banks. Cold weather has taught you to fear moisture almost as much as wind. A frozen blanket is unpleasant, but a damp blanket carried into another freezing night can become dangerous. So quilts hang from wagon bows, coats are turned inside out, socks appear on bushes, ropes, wheels, and any branch willing to hold them. The camp looks less like a military expedition and more like an enormous laundry day conducted by exhausted people. One odd morning custom is the beating of bedding with sticks to loosen frost, dust, straw, and unwanted insects. The sound travels between wagons in soft thumps. Feathers shift inside ticking. A surprising amount of debris falls out. No one examines it too closely. The warmest hours must be used well. Bedding dries. Food is prepared. Animals graze where snow has melted away from the grass. Repairs are completed before the next climb or descent. Specialists have never fully agreed on which warming practice contributes most to survival during severe trail cold. Some emphasize shelter from wind, others point to dry bedding, sufficient calories, group cooperation, or protection from exhaustion. The most convincing answer may be that no single method works alone. A fire without shelter wastes heat. Shelter without food leaves the body weak. Food without dry clothing cannot stop exposure. Warm clothing without healthy animals may leave the family stranded. Every part supports the others. You think back through the frozen nights. The wagon turned carefully against the wind. Canvas gaps blocked with blankets and sacks. Buffalo chips gathered from the prairie. Stones warmed at the edge of the coals. Feather ticks shaken into shape. Children placed near the center. Damp boots bent slowly back into use. Stew passed from hand to hand. A cough watched through the darkest hours. A rope tied between wagons in the whiteout. A borrowed robe spread over strangers. Each act seems modest when seen alone. Together, they form a system of survival built without modern insulation, electric heat, weather reports, or emergency services. It is imperfect, uncomfortable, and vulnerable, yet it is also deeply intelligent. The people around you understand materials through touch. They know which wool still warms when damp. They know which stone may crack in the fire. They know how smoke behaves beneath a changing wind. They know when a child is too quiet. They know how many sticks remain. They know which neighbour will lend a blanket and which one will complain first but lend it anyway. Knowledge moves through families and wagon companies in conversation, imitation, correction, and memory. A mother teaches a daughter how to test a heated brick. An older traveller shows a younger one how to bank coals under ash. A child learns where dry fuel hides beneath grass. The trail becomes a classroom with very strict examinations. Mistakes are remembered because they cost comfort, supplies, or health. Successful habits become so ordinary that they may never reach a diary page. That is why the story of keeping warm is not found in one grand invention. It is found in routine. You step down from the wagon and place one boot carefully into the softening snow. The air smells of pine smoke, wet canvas, animals, and thawing earth, somewhere nearby. Bacon touches a hot pan. The sound is gentle and immediate. The child who is ill sits wrapped in a quilt near the fire, eating slowly. Colour has returned to the face. The baby sleeps against a shoulder. An ox lowers its head to exposed grass. The company is tired, but moving life has begun again. Wheels are checked, ropes are coiled, blankets are folded only after their damp edges dry. Flour sacks return to their places. The borrowed robe is brushed carefully and carried back to its owner with thanks. The neighbour accepts it, examines one muddy corner, and says nothing. This silence is generosity too. Soon the wagons will roll onward, Cold may return before the journey ends. Another storm may rise. A mountain pass may close. Fuel may disappear across open country. Yet the families are not the same people who entered the first frozen night. They have learned where warmth hides. It hides in wool fibres and featherbeds. It hides beneath ash in a living coal. It hides inside a stone that has rested near the fire. It hides in hot broth, dry stockings, and a canvas flap tied securely. Most of all, it hides between people, one body beside another, one family helping another, one tired watcher keeping the fire alive while others sleep. The wagons begin to move. Wooden wheels press into wet earth. Harness rings softly. Oxen breathe clouds into the pale air behind you. The campsite remains marked by ash, flattened snow, and the dark outlines where wagons stood close together. Ahead, the trail continues west. You walk beside the wagon with sunlight touching one shoulder. Water drips from the canvas. Mud gathers around your boots. The morning is still cold, but it no longer feels endless. You survived not because the wagon was warm. It rarely was. You survived because warmth was made again and again from whatever the family had, then guarded through the night and shared before it vanished. Now the road opens beneath the thawing sky. The wheels turn, the camp fades, and the memory of those frozen wagons travels quietly onward with you. The pace begins to slow now. The road stretches beneath a softer light, and the sounds of the company grow distant. Wheel rims turn through damp earth with a low wooden murmur. Harness settles. Canvas lifts and falls in a gentler breeze. You no longer need to count the fuel. You no longer need to test the stone. The blankets are dry enough. The children are resting. The fire has done its work. Let the snowy mountains move farther away. Let the pale trail bend beyond the trees and disappear into morning mist. The wagons become smaller, quieter, until they are only shapes beneath the wide sky. You can release the cold now. Feel the warmth gathered beneath the quilt around you. Notice the steady comfort of the room where you're listening. No wind searches through the seams. No frost touches your boots. No night watch waits outside. The pioneer families continue west without needing you to follow. Their fires glow faintly in the distance. Their voices soften. Their wheels pass beyond hearing. You remain here, safe and still, carrying only the quiet memory of wool blankets, warm bread, drifting smoke, and hands reaching through darkness to cover a sleeping child. Breathe slowly. The trail is calm. The storm has ended. Morning rests across the land, pale and peaceful, while the last snow melts from the wagon canvas and falls in bright drops to the earth. Everything is quiet now. Everything is warm enough, and all are well. Sweet dreams,